All right, so good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Raleigh Planning Board for tonight, Wednesday, January 9th, 2019. Tonight we have four continued public hearings on the agenda. We also have a hearing on an approval not required petition and some other business. The first item we have is a continued public hearing for the definitive subdivision for a four conventional subdivision lots, minimum 60,000 square feet per lot, on properties located at 623, 607, 615, 517R, and 599 Weathersfield Street, owned by the Maven Revocable Trust, the applicant, located in the outlying district. So for the applicant, we have Tom Beatrice. Mr. Beatrice, evening. So, when this was last before the board, we really didn't have any new information. The plan that was submitted was out to our technical review agent, and at the last hearing, I think we just took the decision to continue the matter till tonight. And I believe at this point you have received the comments back from Mr. Graham on this, right?
Yes, the comments dated January 3rd we received
Okay.
Raised some issues with respect to the existing conditions that appear on the subdivision plan as opposed to the actual existing.
Would you mind, if you wouldn't mind, just to the room there, or you can take the one up front.
The comments raised the issue with respect to the existing conditions on site as of the date of the initial filing opposed to the existing conditions now. And again, we were appraised of this yesterday. And there were some suggestions made in the context of the comments that we certainly would not agree to as far as withdrawing the plan. We definitely will not do that. What we'd ask the board to do in consideration of the time and the notice we received would be to continue it to the next meeting and explore the potential of amending the plan at some point in time, given the fact that as we stand here today, 90% or more of the grading has already been completed, and I don't think we're too far away from the actual conditions, to be perfectly honest.
So, if I understand correctly, what you're asking us to do at this time is consider further continuance, and that I think is appropriate given where we're at and given the changing conditions out there. No point in sketching what's out there today because it's going to change in a week. That being said, we also have our own timeline that we're concerned with. I just want to make sure you're in line with that as well. We have 90 days from the time you submit the application to make a determination on it, absent you requesting an extension. So you're aware this extension could put us out over that 90 days?
Yes.
Okay, good. So,
thank you.
And aside, recognizing that you just received those comments a couple days ago and haven't had a chance to discuss them, or probably review them and formulate any kind of a further comment, could you... I still think we have an opportunity to have a discussion here about what it is you're trying to accomplish, given that, I mean, I recognize you're trying to get a plan A and a plan B, but it seems like plan A is pretty well left the gate.
Well, first of all, I make the request to continue, not because I agree with the characterization of Mr. Graham's comments, because I actually do not. I think the board could approve the plan as of the actual conditions, as of the original filing of the plan. But in the interest of cooperation and trying to resolve this, we're going to try to accommodate everyone's point of view to the best that we can.
Okay.
With respect to the subdivision plans relating to the same land that the project is being constructed on, the only thing I could represent to the board, and I think we've discussed this at length, is that my client has a right to seek subdivision approval or any other approval for the use of that land, despite the fact that there's a solar facility being constructed on it. She has a perfect right to do that, and that's what they have a perfect right to do that, and that's what we're doing. And
I don't think the board disputes that. I mean,
for reasons,
in fact, we confirmed that we're going to consider it. It's your application
correct
process.
Correct. So the fact of the matter is, there'll be a solar facility there. may have been revocable trust. Hopefully, will also have a subdivision planned as part of their right. And it may be that it never gets developed. So.
Then you really just confirm what I guess the best of our understanding of it is at this point, so that's fine. At this point, Mr. Graham, do you have any further comments you'd like to? I mean, we're going to wait for them to respond to your proposal, to your comments. All right.
Make a motion to continue to, is there any public comment? Or do we-
Good point. Before we do take any motions here, is there anyone from the community and the public here that is here to comment specifically on this application? Sir? You wouldn't mind, yeah, 'cause the room's tough. If you wouldn't mind letting us know who you are.
Hi, my name is Richard Burns. I live at 620 Weathersfield Street, right across from where the solar farm is. Okay, I'd like to speak to everyone here in reference to what this building is trying to be on. Here we are again trying to save our outlying residential district area. This new proposal is a slap in the face of every resident in this area. When will it stop? I can recall when I spoke to about this new solar farm proposal being a business and that I was not going to sanitize my words on what towns, cities, states, and federal government are not allowed to say when solar energy is being discussed. The last selectmen's meeting I was at, they called the solar farm a business because, in fact, it does make a commodity and a product. Electricity is sold for profit. This was spoken by the selectmen after the last meeting of Berkowitz's announcement of this new development proposal that will be next to the solar farm. This means that more of the forest will be destroyed and all the tall trees will be taken down in front and around our homes. Is there any end to the destroying of the forest for profit? I see a very nice picture with a gate at a solar farm on their plan. I don't know if everybody's seen the picture, but it looks so nice on the plan here.
So, Mr. Burns,
Yes.
as much as we do welcome the comment and we do want to take comment in.
Well, I
don't want to. I really don't mean to cut you off. This is really not the solar farm.
I am going to be going into this.
Okay, then please. We can't just deal with the solar farm. That's not before us. Sure.
This particular project is not designed to be next door to the solar farm. Where more trees will be cut.
Will there be driveways in front of our properties? In front of my property?
The plan is available to all neighbors. In terms of this plan,
It appears that to be the case. And
It will
so,
be
Mr. Burns, what they're proposing here, and it has been a little bit of a question mark for some of the members of the board as well. They're proposing for a subdivision laid out over some of the very same land that the solar array is laid out on.
Well, I'd like to comment on...
I don't see how the intention is never that both be running parallel and simultaneously. They are hoping to have both permits and approvals, and it seems to me that they can only choose one or the other, and they're choosing the solar farm, but potentially they want this subdivision as their plan B, which it seems as they're entitled to do.
I think it's pertinent to, and I think what a lot of people are concerned about, that even if the subdivision is approved, they may not be able to implement a residential building permits at the time. But I guess the intent, will there be the potential for there to be a road, a residential road, and a driveway access to the solar farm existing simultaneously? Is that a potential situation? And I don't think that's ever been made clear. I think that's what a lot of people are concerned about.
And as much as I think that is where the community concern would come from, we really aren't going to get to that issue until first we see a proposed plan that shows the current conditions, and then we'll have to have a conversation about how those current conditions would be changed if this new subdivision were to be implemented. So we're not in a, neither plan proposes two entryways. Neither plan, each plan proposes one driveway, and they're not going to be able to execute both plans on this property, so I think the conclusion that you can reach is that there'll only be one driveway.
The one that exists now, are you talking about? No.
If they decided they'd like to go with the subdivision 10 years from now, they'd have to decommission this completely, close down the road, close it up, restore it. We have a decommissioning bond on the agenda tonight, and then they have to come forward and build their new plan subject to the conditions in that proposal.
Are they grandfathered in at this time of their lots? Do you know of that?
As far as-
what I'm going for is the zoning laws in reference to it. And from what I can see, if they don't have the frontage, they must have 180,000 square feet. And what I see is wetland across from me, and I don't see it possible. So that's why I'm up here. Why is this even being able to go forward?
Well, I think it should be explained. They do have the right, as Mr. Beechers actually stated, that they have a right to submit the plan and have it reviewed as an alternate.
For whatever reason, there are many reasons for it.
Yeah.
That's one of them. So bearing in mind that this plan, preliminary plan, was filed back in April. So, months.
Can I ask, why does this plan exist, Plan B?
I just put it on the record. She has a right, they have a right to do that, and they choose to exercise that right for several reasons, not just as a plan.
Okay, I'll have a right to come back and say what I have to say.
Absolutely, sir. In fact, we're considering a motion to continue shortly, and we'll have this back and forth this board, in the next month. So, keep it, mark your calendar.
All right, thank you.
Graves?
Thank you for listening.
Tammy Graves, 624 Weathersfield Street. So I'm just a little confused because you guys keep saying an alternate. So are we alternate with the solar farm or alternate with the subdivision? So what are we doing? A subdivision or a solar farm? I keep hearing this is an alternate to this, and this is an alternate to that. So is there a solar farm to be placed in that area or not?
I would tell you, the applicant has an approval to develop a solar field on that location, and they've begun that process. They also have the right to further subdivide the land. They wouldn't be able to do both simultaneously, but they do have the right to hold both permits.
Okay, it's just confusing. You
I agree.
Alternate. So
And not to add to the confusion, what we're discussing today is the 4-lot subdivision. Okay, so everything else is an alternate to that, I suppose.
And just so procedurally, they wouldn't be able to, while the solar fields are existing on 2 of the 4 lots, for those 2 lots, at the very least, they would not be able to get building permits for residential development while those solar fields, because it would be two primary uses on 1 lot. They wouldn't be able to get building permits to build residential structures on 2 of the lots.
I understand this is a solar division thing that's on here. I mean, a subdivision thing that's on here. So I don't know if I have the right to ask this question. Several questions have a question about the use of so many electric poles going up one side of the solar facility that none of us are aware of. We don't see that in the visual plan. So this is the right place to ask that question, or who should we be asking that question?
So I will tell you that this board is the right board to bring that issue to. It is something we're aware of and just became aware of, and we're going to be dealing with it later on today as we deal with another aspect of the solar farm later on tonight, but separate from this agenda item. Okay? So I believe we had a motion to continue.
No, I didn't quite get it out
sorry.
of my mouth. I make a motion that we continue this to our next meeting.
We have a date?
January 30th, we're doing workshops. If you want to, I didn't really want to have any
What's the regular meeting?
February 16th, I think. But we're really getting close to the deadline at that point for this.
Well, they can handle it, that's right.
So I don't know if you would want to have like this as an extra item on the January 30th.
No, don't do that.
You know,
I don't think so, because it really is going to be, that meeting's going to be more of a work in the room and discuss, we'd have to kind of break it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
close it out and then go to a formal meeting.
It'll still be a regular meeting of the, or it'll be a meeting of the planning board. We'll post it.
But it's more informal.
But yeah, it'll be much.
So to mix business with informal.
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer the 30 only try to expedite these issues as best as.
Is the 30th being held here?
The regular planning board meeting is scheduled for February 13th. And yeah, I was looking for really at having the upcoming meetings in this room.
Okay.
On the, I think it's the 15th and the 14th.
So the zoning issues start at 7 p.m., right? The zoning issues, that meeting starts at 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I was.
The informal meeting
Yeah. The workshop we're calling
The
it.
workshop.
on the
Yeah.
30th.
On the 30th. I mean, do we want to?
Yeah, we could have the informal meeting before the, they was,
So we're thinking at 8, so is the workshops at
We start the
7?
workshop at 7. We could hold, look at 8 or 8:30.
I would say 8:30. 8:30.
Why don't we, actually, why don't we say earlier?
And then they consider it.
Yeah. We're going to say 8 o'clock, okay? That way, we do have something that's happening beforehand. We don't know how long it's going to take. If it runs long, we'll call you first thing as soon as we break on that. Okay, thanks.
I second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Who was the second?
Troy.
Troy.
Okay, thank you, and evening. Next item on the agenda, we have a continued public hearing for a special permit site plan review for a retail management establishment at 264-268 Newburyport Turnpike, which is Nature's Remedy as the applicant in the retail, the retail zoning district.
I'm going to recuse myself.
Very good. Texted one day, I think the planning on coming this evening.
Batting 500 again.
Yeah.
Good evening. Bob Carr with Nature's Remedy of Massachusetts. I'm here also with Dave Miller, part of Nature's Remedy, and Steve Sawyer, he's our civil engineer. Just before Steve gets into his dialogue relative to the civil part of our project here, just a quick update on Nature's Remedy, just to let you know where we are in the approval process.
Sure.
We're a seed-to-sale company, vertically integrated. At this point, our facility, our cultivation facility and processing facility is in Lakeville. It's a $12 million facility. As of 2 weeks ago, it is complete. We've received all our local town permits, and we've received our state permits to move into cultivation. We're just waiting for that actual physical permit from the state to begin. So we feel within the next couple of weeks we'll actually start planting. Within a 4-month period of time, we'll be ready for product, and that's what we're hoping for here in Raleigh, is to have in a 4-month period of time to have a place to bring our products to. In addition to Raleigh, we're also in the town of Millbury. We've completed the approval process there. We're under construction. We're about 3/4 of the way through a freestanding facility right on Route 146. Our other location is in Tingsboro. There we're also completed the local approval process, and we're now in the building permit stage. So I'll let Steve take it from here relative to the site plan.
Good evening. Steve Sawyer with Moore & Cameron Group. We did receive the comments from Graham Associates. Unfortunately, we actually didn't receive them until, I think, yesterday. I have taken a look at some of those just as far as the process now. We are providing a full traffic report. Jeff Dirk with Finance Associates is in the process of providing that. That should be, I think, it's probably scheduled to be completed within the week. So that will take care of that comment as far as the traffic report. I think one of the items that was very important was parking, where Nature's Remedy is taking control of the entire property. The existing truck repair service will be vacated from the rear building, and that building would be vacant. I took a look at what we could provide for temporary parking or overflow parking around the rear on the existing gravel surface, and this is a 60-foot full bay, so 24-foot aisle with 18-foot spaces, 9-foot wide. We can provide 42 additional spaces beyond the 28, so that's a total of 70 spaces on the property just for this sole business. This is the only business on the property. I would say that's ample for even any peak condition at the onset of business here. I think anyway, on any event, the employees would be parking in the gravel. They'd be directed to park in the gravel, so all 28 spaces would be provided on the paved area up front. There were some comments regarding the level on the application. I had just made some estimates on trips to the site. So there was a comment regarding, was it 225 or 450? The 225 was stated as a round trip on the application, and the 450 is trip ends. So I'm not a traffic engineer. Jeff will explain that at the next meeting, round trips versus trip ends. But as far as, I think there was, in the comments, there is reference to the traffic study done on 264, 268, and those are trips. So basically, 2 trips is one person going to, it's a trip in and a trip out. It counts as 2 trips. And there was a comment, he alluded to the 77 trips at a peak hour on a Saturday. If you take half of that, so you're at 30, what was that? You'd be at 36 or 37, depending how it works out. So I don't know how long, as far as a transaction would take, say it's a half hour. Based on that, the 28 paved spaces would be okay during that peak time. If each so they would have, if it was a half hour per transaction. So our feeling is, or my position is that the 28 paved would be ample, but you don't know. But we do have 42 extra, so that's a substantial cushion.
And again, that's because you have the access to the unoccupied building to the rear of that lot, right?
I'm sorry, what's that?
The additional spaces would come on that lot in the back.
Yes.
What would be the use of that existing building? What's the intended use of that existing building in the rear?
There is none.
There is none. Okay.
At this point, if we do decide,
so you take control of the whole land that building happens to be on it. You just don't need to have any use for it right now.
That's correct.
I got you.
There's no bathrooms in it. It's actually just a buffer building. It's 4-story wall, 4 roof.
I see.
So if any use were to change, they'd be back before the planning board.
No, I noticed some other dispensaries have gone to an online appointment system. I mean, that seems to have alleviated all the heavy traffic. That's something you guys would consider implementing, particularly as when demand is at its highest?
Yeah, if we were doing this today, I'd say yes. But the fact is that we'll be doing this 4 or 5 months down the road. A lot of other dispensaries will be opened up. I don't think that'll be the need to do that. We'll work directly with law enforcement at that point, to assess it and to see where we stand and to see what that peak demand might look like and what's happening around, in Georgetown and the other food dispensaries here in town. But we feel this additional parking, that's a lot of parking, and a trip typically is 10 minutes. So, and people can pre-order online, come in and just pick up.
All right, so
Also, I guess I did get some feedback from Jeff regarding my site layout. I asked him to take a look. You'll notice there'll be an updated set of plans that will be coordinated with him. The radius in, that was increased to 30 feet for a commercial entry. Before that was only 15. So the radius in is increased to 30-foot radius. And I widened the entry to 24 feet. He felt that would be minimal, or that was required for the commercial entrance here. I asked him to take a look at the circulation. He agreed with my take, having the two-way here, because typically if you come in, you'll come in and park, and if you want to leave, you back out and leave in that manner. He didn't like the fact that if he created a one-way loop here and skinny this up, that if you wanted to get to the back, you come in, turn around, you turn in and have to make that right. His thoughts, he can explain it when he's at the meeting, but his thoughts, the only reason you go to a one-way is if you have to, you're constricted by width, which is the case here. So that's why I ended up going to the one-way circulation around that side. And I think it makes sense here. You pull in, if there's no spacious area, you just continue around. You continue around the building to find an open parking space. There was a comment regarding the landscape area on the side of the building. Most likely, if somebody gets out of their car, they'll just walk across the pavement. The straightest line to that sidewalk. I leave it to the discretion. We don't care whether as far as this strip along the edge of the building is sidewalk or landscaping. Probably slightly more expensive to provide a sidewalk, but then less maintenance. I think it would provide aesthetically. I think in the comments there's aesthetics to have landscaping around the building. We leave that to the discretion of the board, which they prefer there. And I think those are some of the major hits on that. I don't know if Larry wants to expound on anything, we can ask. But we'll be providing a full written response to all the comments coordinated with Jeff Herr.
terrific. Okay. And Mr. Graham, do you want to perhaps?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. I'm happy to see that in such a short time, Steve and their team has been able to respond to a couple of things. And actually, I had sketched out 38 spaces in the back where you had come out with 42. So we're pretty much in agreement of what you could do there. And again, we're not suggesting it be paved, at least up front, that you would just operate it as a gravel parking space until you or the board, the town, saw the need to pave it if your business continues to demand that additional parking. I had some other questions with respect to the use of the rear of the building, what that is used for now, what it's going to be used for on the second floor and first floor, I believe, and the second floor of your addition, which appears from the architectural plans to have a second floor. So when the traffic engineer gets into the required parking, that should be taken into consideration, the uses of those two floors, as well as the number of employees that you have or you're proposing to have in your facility. So you've got those three add-ons, I think, with respect to parking. The next application that the board's going to hear, their traffic assessment did not give any parking estimates, so that's one of my comments will be for that project. So I'll be looking for parking as Steve said, he's thinking 28, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, but that's what it's all about, is what parking do you need there for your other occupants of the site, for your employees, what's your turnover, and if you've got a site generation that says you're 38 or 39 folks in your peak hour, and that turnover, that's going to determine what your parking is, all those factors. So that's one of my main concerns with this project. I had some other things that hopefully, Steve, if you look through them, if there's anything else you want to talk about tonight that's in there, then we should perhaps kick it around. Otherwise, wait till the next meeting and see how you address them.
Yeah, I think, well, as far as stormwater, I don't have a problem addressing where particularly where we're reducing impermeable. It's a redevelopment project. It's the greatest extent practical. So just with reducing the impervious surface, reducing stormwater flow, and granted we might not get our 80% TSS. There's a few things we can do to get reasonable suspended solid removals, and I'll provide it. It's just, I'm looking at just a drainage narrative and then the stormwater addressing the
One thing on that is you're proposing a long bioretention swale or something along the southerly border. I saw no overflow for that. I don't know if you have anything in the highway or you're going to overflow to the south to the town land, but I want to look at that.
Yeah. So right now, well, as you're aware, this is just a sea of pavement.
Yep.
There's no curb cut. So everything just flows right down. I think there's a gutter line that runs down somewhere between the privately owned land and the right in Route 1, just runs down and then into the town land. So my thought is, I could put some check dams, and then either we could direct or break it up into smaller overflows. I'll look at that. But for all intents and purposes, this is all going to run in that direction. And also, similarly, so right now, both sides flow in this direction. So I was just planning for, it'll flow across this lawn, this landscaped area. This will pond, so during smaller events, it would probably not overflow. But during extreme events, it would just end up just bleeding out and sheet flowing across the pavement during some sort of extreme event. I don't think it warrants, we're improving the situation, and it doesn't, right now, there's this sheet flow across that entire area. I don't think it warrants a structured piping.
You're going to work out your pre and post, and at the end of the day, that's what we're going to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to respond, as far as the second floor of the property question, again, we're going to have control of the entire property. The second floor, half of the second floor will be for utilities for the first floor, and the other half will just be an office. So the second floor is approximately 1,000 square feet, just a little bit under. I figure half of that would be, a 500 square foot office. The other half will house utilities. So there won't be any additional parking required for any other tenants. It's just going to be for our employees.
Okay. No apartment.
No apartment.
Okay.
So one thing we'd like to do is a site visit, and we'd like to perhaps consider some dates for that in the next couple of weeks for the next meeting, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yep, that would be fine.
All right. And before we do that, I should certainly address the public. Is there anybody here that has any questions about this project specifically? All right, good. So I'd like to set up a time to do it. I think the later part of the afternoon would make sense it seems like there's a consensus that would be better for the board, and we're trying to stay away from Mondays and Fridays. So is there some date that you'd like to propose that we can do it Tuesday through Thursday in the afternoon?
That would work out fine with us. We also have some interior plans. We've actually brought them with us, but at that point it might be a good idea to go over them. I don't see a point unless you want me to discuss the interior layout here. We could do it there, open up a set of plans, and let you guys have a feel for what an interior looks like.
I mean, why don't we hold it off to the next meeting?
Yeah, sure.
We'll do that first. Do the site visit first. So, there's a couple of dates you want to throw out there? How's next week
Get
look?
the next couple of weeks, or
Yeah.
the 15th, 16th, 17th, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th?
15th, 16th, 17th next week.
Village before dark.
Yeah, anyone.
Let's just say the 16th, try to do it in the daylight, 3:30? Is that 3:30?
Yep, no, that's fine. The sooner the better for us. Again, we're under a bit of a time crunch with our Lakeville facility getting online, and so that'd be great.
Okay, well, good, we'll see you then. And then, we also need a motion to continue.
What day is it?
Make a motion, we continue the next meeting?
Okay, and a second.
Second.
So we've got a motion to continue to the next meeting, which is going to be February 13th. And we've got a second from John. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll see you on the 16th at 3:30, and otherwise, have you on for the 13th.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Thanks. Okay, so the next item we have on the agenda, we have a continued public hearing for a special permit site plan for a retail marijuana sales establishment and RMD at 300 Newburyport Turnpike, location of the Easy Farm Variety Old Planters of Cape Ann, is the applicant in the retail zoning district. So who do we have tonight? Evening.
Good evening. I'm Spencer Calker, President and CEO of Old Planters of Cape Ann, and basically we're waiting for the opportunity to have you guys come out to the site. I think that's one of the next steps we have to do, and I think we're also waiting. I have not received, I don't believe, Larry's report on the review of what we've done.
Sure, we'll give you a status on that.
Yeah, and then we're basically, if we can set the date up for the visit, the same date would work for us.
Actually, yeah, you want to say
Same day?
Yeah,
same day?
perfect.
I don't want to give anyone narrow time. Should we go earlier for this one or later?
Later.
I'm available anytime.
Can we say 4:30 with you?
We can do 4:30 or 2:30, whatever you want to do.
Tell you what, be there at 4.
I'll be there at 4. The bell's on.
All right. So, Mr. Graham, have you, where are you at on the review on this?
I submitted a report to the board on January 3rd.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it, sorry. That's why I asked for it. Okay, all right. So I will review that, and then basically we can discuss that in more detail at the meeting.
If you want.
Yeah, if you have a copy of it, great.
So, yeah, given that Mr. Graham did prepare that, if you've got a few minutes, maybe we'll just let Mr. Graham kind of summarize what some of his observations are. We can have a conversation about that.
That sounds perfect.
And then we'll look at it further when we meet next week. But,
That sounds great.
At this point, it's okay. I'm going to...
This project's a little bit different than the previous one the board was just discussing. It's an existing site, so I'm not concerned about drainage and landscaping and a few other things that we would be looking at the other site. But the primary comments that I made with regard to my review of this application were traffic, parking, and pedestrian movements. And the traffic, they did have a traffic assessment prepared by TEC, which at the last meeting, the traffic engineer presented this to the board. I subsequently reviewed that and have some comments that are in the report about that. My primary concern on this site, as was with the last site, is parking. There are approximately 102 existing spaces at this site right now. The board's familiar with some of the other businesses there. El Tapatio is the primary business and a few others. So of the 102 spaces that exist there today, 71 approximately are in the front, 31 of them are in the back of the site. The traffic report indicated that they did some turning movement counts on November 28th and December 1st of this year. Those counts were done after the Easy Variety store was closed and vacant, as well as there's a few other vacancies in that plaza. They then generated a proposed traffic generation table using their surveyed turning movements, and then went into the ITE Land Use Code 882, the marijuana dispensary, and added to that what that code allowed or suggested that they do. And the peak hour that they had was a Saturday midday, 125 vehicle trips. That's 62, we'll say 62 in, 62 out. Again, my concern is that the available parking at the existing plaza will be stressed during their peak hour operation, whether it be peak morning, peak evening, peak Saturday. Peak Saturday, based on their study, was the most intense. I have explained all that in my report. I don't know that I need to try to get into any further detail with that. They can read it, rebut it, whatever they choose to do there on that part of it. I did notice that in the back of the site behind the building, the spaces which they show on their site plan, 8 of them is a parking area that's not fully paved. That would have to be done prior to an occupancy permit or approval. The spaces at the rear of the site are not paint lined, as indicated on the plan. That obviously needs to be done to control the parking. And the site, to the best of my knowledge, in the time that I was back there at night, is not lighted, quite dark, and that would have to be done as well. I did cruise by there yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock, right at the beginning of a peak period that they had in their traffic report. I counted 21 cars in the front of the 71 spaces, so that would leave 50 spaces there, just as a matter of fact, a matter of observation of myself at one particular point in time on a Tuesday afternoon. I think that kind of summarizes where I'm at until they get through the report and respond to the report and the board. I don't know that I have anything else.
Sure. Thank you. And
We have one of our traffic people here. I don't know if you want to respond or if you want to just review it.
I'd rather review it and then write a formal response. This is the first time I've
sure. No, I understand. and we'd like to give you the time to do that.
Great.
I do think that's not a big surprise, because we've considered parking on that site for other reasons, and I think it sounds like there's some flexibility with the undeveloped parking lot there that's there now. Something
Exactly.
that
And we are prepared to, when we open, basically, to, again, work with similar to what they did at ATG in Salem, to be able to have it set up so it's appointment only and really make it clear we're not trying to create any issues with the neighbors, any issues with the street.
Right.
So we have no problem with a sensible, smart rollout.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Well,
great.
To give you the chance to respond to that, I think we should consider just continuing this till the next hearing.
Sounds great.
And otherwise, we'll see at 4:30 on the 16th.
Yep.
Get a motion on that to continue.
Make a motion to continue to the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you very much.
You know what? I'm absolutely remiss in not opening the floor to anyone here to make comments. Before we take that motion, let me do that.
Great.
Jim Mountain from Harrison Circle. I was here at the last meeting, and one of my concerns is the impact on traffic and parking. I work very close to the facility in Brookline, and since the last meeting, I've done some I did a little survey of my own. The Brookline facility has about 10 parking spaces. Any overflow has to go now onto the street. And I've done a count of 30 to 40 cars that now park on Boylston Street. That doesn't count any cars that may be on Walnut or Washington or Station Street, which are all in Brookline Village. And last month, the Brookline facility has added a second police officer to handle all the traffic. At the last meeting, there was a gentleman here from North Billerica that commented that the big impact on traffic downtown is the fire station, but that's not true. They've got well-coordinated traffic lights there that work with the other lights in the area, and so any disruption in traffic to the fire station is minutes, maybe half a dozen times a week. So it sounds like the parking is not going to be adequately addressed here. And what's going to happen to all these people that now need to have a place to park, and you can't park on Route 1. So it's one of my big concerns here, and it applies to both. They didn't want to take, I don't want to say this twice. And then the second concern is if this turns out to be an issue, what I don't want to be looking at is 2 years from now looking at the town warrant saying we need more money to fix a problem that might be avoided tonight or during this round of meetings.
Well, certainly we're here to consider the parking issues, and as you can see, there are engineers looking at that carefully. They've got traffic engineers performing their studies. What kind of problems do you foresee that we'd be addressing at the town's expense down the road?
I don't know, but if there's, I just want to make sure that everybody's considering all of the signs. I know that the town is looking at this as being a method of getting some money into the town, but if we end up spending money to fix things that might be overlooked at this point, I don't know. I just want to make sure that everybody is considering all of the angles.
And we're going to continue to look at that carefully. I appreciate your comments. I mean, I do think that the hype is going to wear down as more dispensaries come online. And, I think Brookline's a very different community than Raleigh, and Brookline Center is a very different location than Route 1 in Raleigh. So, I'm not sure it's a perfect analogy.
I know it may not be a perfect analogy, but it's something I see in the
Sure. And your point's taken. It's something that I think a lot of people are mindful of and concerned about with these things. Thank you for your time. Anyone else that'd like to address the board? All right, so I think we have a motion on the floor then to continue to... Please, sorry.
I'll be prompt. My concerns with regards to traffic, main field, New 11, Raleigh, Spencer Road. My first question is just whether the planning board is going to consult with the board of selectmen or other town officials regarding the traffic situation. It's my understanding that they're working with our state representative and state senator to try to get a traffic light put in near Weathersfield or Center Street because of recent severe accidents, including fatalities, which is very close to where this facility would be. And so my question is, if additional traffic is approved as a result of these plans, would that jeopardize our ability to negotiate with the state to get a traffic light? It seems to me that those two might not be compatible. And my second question, and then I'll go sit down, was that I did review the traffic study, and it indicated in the comments to it at the beginning that it took into account that there would be two facilities proximate to each other. But looking at the data in the appendices, it wasn't clear that there was traffic from two facilities. It looked like there was only traffic from one facility. So I don't know if there's a way that can be clarified in the follow-up report.
I appreciate your comments, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll make sure that Mr. Graham looks at that.
I don't have anything to add.
I think that we're considering each of these applications alone, and I don't think you're including their numbers, and they're not including your numbers.
They do.
We do.
Oh, you do?
They do.
We actually included their numbers in our background traffic,
Okay.
assuming that they were already built before our traffic came.
I see, so you're trying to...
And
Trying to accommodate and be
the other
safe.
study hasn't been done, so we would be looking for them to do the same.
Oh, okay.
Cross-reference, if you will. The only thing I want to point out is that, again, this location is not Brookline, as you said. It's a whole different community. Very different, so.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Go, sure.
I just wanted to make sure you forward the letter, the other tenants of the building that I think Karen had forwarded about the parking concerns. Do you have that?
The letter is in the packet.
Oh, okay. You know what? We do have it. Can we make a point to make sure we read that letter into the record at the next meeting?
You have a copy of it?
We do have a copy of it. Thank you.
So that will be reviewed as well?
In fact, it's in here. I'll make sure we read it into the record at the next hearing on this matter.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Good.
Didn't we have like another place called something like Fox Meadow?
I keep forgetting it too. I think it's called Fox.
Larry knows.
Knoll?
What's the Fox? Yeah, the Fox thing.
Fox Run? The other Fox. Out on Route 1, there's a condominium complex called Fox
Meadow or something like that.
Further north on Route 1?
Yeah.
Further north on Route 1. It's off of Oxbow Meadow.
Okay, Fox Meadow. I'm going to ask them to change their name.
This is Fox Hollow.
Let's go. We'll follow like Ipswich. Who's up next?
That's up next.
Okay.
All right. All right, so the next item we have on the agenda for this evening is a continued public hearing for the Fox Hollow Open Space Residential Subdivision at 430 Weathersfield Street, the Taylor Lane property. It's a review of an OSRD special permit with a site plan and preliminary subdivision plan. Good evening.
Good evening, Joanne. We have to say the LLC, the application with the last time we were before the board, there was
Are we still preliminary?
made by members of the public as well as the board, and I'm just going to go over them. I'm going to go over them for you. So the matter was relative to the yield plan and whether or not we were rightly showing 45 lots. The issue was, did in fact the property perk acceptably to entitle it to 45 lots. So we ended up going out that way from doing research, and we did in fact perk and get acceptable perks. So you have it. We did send that information to Mr. Graham. We perked on each side of the street, and we got acceptable perks. We had the Board of Health present. And so that condition that remained relative to the yield plan, has been satisfied. Very well put. What we did do too, just so that everybody can go with we were absolutely on both sides of the road, is we did indicate them on the plan, and they were done right here. And they were done. So that was the first material question. The next one was Jill, I think, there's Mr. Pierce, okay. So Mr. Pierce had brought up, how do we know why or what is your requirement, or what is your reasoning for requesting a waiver from the amount of open space? And I apologize, Mr. Pierce, because I did think that there was sufficient information to be able to yield a result in the application, but I think that it was pretty convoluted to really need more of a formula. And so what I had done was I prepared that, and I, look at that, and made large. Everybody has it. That's the one thing. Okay. So essentially what I've done is I had worked through the open space. As you can see on the spreadsheet that you have in front of you, how I had proceeded was in two different manners. One, I show you the requirement for open space for a single-family home subdivision, and one I show you for a multifamily home subdivision.
I do that simply because it is possible that we will seek to have some congregate living or community living for basically at the very tip that I had discussed with you.
Do you have extra copies of that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what? I just thought we had it. Yes.
If you want the larger copy, Cliff, you want
Want the larger format? No, it's got its readers.
Yeah, it is. It does require glasses, that's for sure. So essentially what we had done was we had made a determination that this particular property would most likely require a waiver for the amount of wetland contained within the open space. Number one, because of the vast amount of riverfront area that is included. So if I may, I'm just going to walk you through it. So the total area of the lot in itself is basically 4 million. Let's talk in round numbers because it's been easier than spelling them all out. It's about 4 million square feet of land. The total amount of wetland resource areas, which is simply jurisdictional wetland, vernal pools, BBW, any kind of wetland resource, as well as any riverfront area. So by that I mean the entire 200-foot area that extends from the riverfront. That's included, and that number is about 1.5 million square feet. The wetland resource area that is included in the subdivision and in the roadway and otherwise not included in the open space is 23,650. While in many, many instances when you do the open space, and I believe the reason why this particular community actually requires open space have the same percentage of wetland as does the developable land, is because the last thing you want people to do is simply just give away open space that would be deemed by the town to be insufficient, inferior, not of a high quality. I don't believe that that is the case in this particular instance because there are many benefits to getting riverfront area. While truly the riparian area cannot be developed for purposes of structures, it is a beautiful amount of open space because it provides much habitat for animals, wildlife, and all kinds of fauna, flora as well. So basically what we have is on the entire property itself there's 36% wetland. There is also a 10% riverfront area. So the entire riverfront is not unbuildable, if you will. The Conservation Commission has the right to entitle an applicant to use up to 10% of the total riverfront area. So that's why, if you note, I show you what those numbers are. So now we'll just walk through how I calculated the open space. So the open space requiring for single-family homes pursuant to the open space residential subdivision is that you need to provide 45% of the total lot area must be open space if you're going to qualify for an OSRD. So as you see from the first column, that's the required area. So basically, this particular project would need to provide about 1.9 million square feet of land, this open space. They actually, in fact, provide 2.5 million square feet of open space. The wetland resource area, if we keep it at the 36, would simply be limited to the 674,000 square feet. What we actually do provide is almost all the wetland area because, as you know, when you come into the project, the reason you want these areas, just encompasses that whole amount, is because you want the jurisdictional areas. It's something that you deem valuable and you want to maintain, keep, and preserve. So that's why that's simply the reason. So now you see that we provided the entire amount because of the way the land's set up and for no other reason. But now if you go down and you see what I provided, I basically say that if you look at the raw format, 60% of the open space most certainly is wetland, and you can see just from the map, or just from the picture itself. However, what you need to do is actually look at the real numbers. So what I have done is provide what I call the adjustment. And so basically, I took the amount that is required, which is the 45%, and then I said, okay, what amount of resource area really should be burdening the required portion? And by that I mean, if I'm giving you extra land, right, and it's 616,000 square feet, and that's all wetland, Well, I'm giving it to you. I'm just giving it to you. It doesn't, it's not even part of the formula. So that's why I did it like that. So I said, okay, so I have 1.5 million square feet of wetland. I reduced it to the 10% riverfront because as we spoke about, that's developable. That really is kind of upland because we can develop it as you can as well. And then I reduced for that amount that I just said to you is additional land. So that's basically the difference between what I provide and the required amount. And basically what I come up with is if you burden the required amount of open space with the adjusted amount of wetland, you end up with a percentage of 39% of the open space being given to you, truly, and in I guess in adjustment format, it's only 39%, that's what we're there. So we would request a waiver for the 3% of the change because of the value type of resource area we were providing. And I hope that was rather instructive. I think that open space for the multifamily, not necessarily because we're definitely going to do it or anything of that vein. I just wanted you to see the two different components because many times we only talk about the 50%, but it really is 45%. I don't know if you have questions about that, but I did want to go through it. Now, obviously, this is not the final number because we don't have the final lot configuration and we have yet to discuss the length of road or how we're going to proceed or even what the subdivision really will look like. But I still wanted to present because Mr. Pierce had asked for it and I truly had thought I had it. And when I found that I hadn't, I felt it was my obligation to bring it forward.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce, do you have any, can you comment on what?
Yes, just for the record, my name is Cliff Pierce. I'm an abutter, and I'm speaking tonight as a butter and not as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I just want to make that clear. First of all, I have to disagree with you about the 45% figure. The open space requirement generally for single-family homes and multifamily homes is the same. It's 50%. There is a provision in our bylaw which says that if the developer chooses to have recreational facilities on the part of the development to be used in common by all people who buy homes there, that the statistic can go down to be reduced to 45%. So that's not what they're proposing so far. So at this point I dispute that 45 is the accurate statistic. I believe it's 50%. And if you do that, if you did it based on the 50%, you would see a bigger difference between the distance or disparity between what the bylaw requires in terms of upland and the open space and what they're providing. In terms of going further through this, and I also, these statistics, this chart is just being laid on us tonight. And so I hope that the board would not make a decision on this tonight. Okay?
This is all preliminary.
Yes,
There's
sure.
a lot to digest here, but just looking at some of her statistics, she has about 1.5 million square feet of wetland in the open space, and in order to show that she gets close to complying with the bylaw requirement, she wants a reduction for 10% of the riverfront, which personally I don't have a problem with. And actually, to me, that seems quite reasonable because Larry can correct me if I'm wrong. He knows more about this than I do. But generally speaking, 10% of the riverfront area is not a no-build zone like wetlands are. So 10%, my understanding is 10% of the riverfront zone can be used to actually build something.
So put that 10% back in.
So I have no problem with that 10%. And reduction for extra land, I have no problem with that either. So if they're putting in more than 50% of the area into the open space, and we presume that, and I think it's safe to presume that all that extra land is wetlands. That's the reason why we're putting it in there. That you should give them a credit for that. And so, but even if you do those two calculations, and again, this is based on 45% versus 50%, which I would submit as the correct statistic, they do come up short in meeting that requirement. Now, the board has never, and I think the board should be aware, that the planning board has never allowed a developer to do an OSRD without meeting the minimum open space requirement. So this would be a first. We have allowed, we have waived that requirement if the developer chooses to give us extra land that's wetlands. Because by doing that, I mean, there's no problem with them giving us that extra land, but by doing that, that raises the percentage of wetland in the open space. So to that extent, we've allowed a waiver. But the board has never said, well, you don't need to meet that 50% requirement initially. So it would be a new precedent, and I think it would be a slippery slope. It would tell developers in the future that, well, we really don't have to meet this. We can do less than 50%, and the planning board will accept it. So as a general principle, personally, I would be against waiving the minimum requirement.
But there are things they can do to meet that.
Yes, they can put in more upland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Or else they can consider some recreational amenities.
That's allowed by the bylaw, but I don't see them doing that. They would probably have to lose a house lot or two, though, if they're going to go that way.
Again, I can't stress enough that I did say that I'm not trying to get this approved. This was done simply as an exercise to provide the board with information. I'm not saying that this is it. I'm saying that this is simply the mathematical computation that I had yet to provide, number one. Number two, with regard to the 4550, it's my understanding that the town is going to create recreational areas. We can decide whether or not that particular provision would apply or wouldn't apply. That's up to this board to decide. And relative to the waiver, it seems to me that there's a reason why there's a specific requirement or specific ability to waive it, because there are instances in which this board is entitled to make that decision, and there is no slippery slope. You actually decide based on certain criteria, and if you deem the type of land you're being given of more importance than maybe other land, because, again, the riparian zone is a very different animal than a wetland. There is absolutely no comparison relative to habitat being provided by the two different types of zones. But again, I'm not seeking at this point necessarily for you to vote on the waiver. I'm simply telling you that it's possible that I'm going to come back to you for a waiver. It's possible that I'm going to redesign and change many the provision. I just wanted to give you that document. So that's your working, breathing document, and it's very easy to manipulate going forward, because all I have to do is plug in numbers so I can come back to you. So with regard to the waiver, that's simply information for you that, I think is helpful, and I appreciate the fact that, Cliff brought it up so that we would actually bring it more to your attention. The next major component of our follow-up, and I apologize for not giving you more time. I know you got the plans a couple of days ago, but with the holiday season, it was very difficult for us to turn around the plan. But what we did do is we went back to the drawing board, essentially, and tried to create the shortest length of road. So as this board knows, Taylor Lane does exist. It actually is a road that exists. What we did is we actually took the terminus of what is now Taylor Lane and made the loop start at Taylor Lane. So what the heck does that mean, right? So basically, on the plan that we provided, what we did was we had the engineer keep the old street on so that you could see it, because it's a little easier then to compare the two. And what the engineer did, without any wetland crossing, because that was relatively important to him. Oh, do you all have copies of this?
Yeah.
It's the second.
Giant one.
It's the second page.
She said something about the town putting in recreational facilities.
No, she did not. No, she did not.
Yeah, so we're
Not here.
It should.
anything that we haven't really considered that proposal. It's pretty unlikely. If we were going to consider any recreational amenities, we would seek the developer to.
As far as the bylaw that he was talking about, if the bylaw says that they're putting recreational
No,
facilities.
that's not the town, that's the developer. I was talking about where a developer builds a development, and as part of that, he wants to provide a swimming pool or a tennis court for the residents of the development.
So it has to be done by the development.
Yes.
Correct.
Passive means walking trails. Passive means you create those areas where you do Tai Chi, I don't know, things of that nature. I mean, that's more city, but that's what it is. And again, it's nothing the board has ever even done before other than the golf course. So again, this is simply meant to commence dialogue and not to solidify any
Well, you
way
said I don't want
forward.
to quibble, but we didn't do it with the golf course either, and we required 50% open space.
But the golf course consisted of the open space. The open space was the golf course. That's the point. So if I may...
Bylaw changed to the...
Oh, yeah. I think before...
It was 70%.
Yeah.
By the time
Yeah,
we got
it was different before. So with regard to this length of road, so what we did is we actually had the loop start where approximately, it might be a little closer to what it's supposed to be, where the end of actual Taylor Lane actually ends. So that's why we started here. And the purpose of this particular loop is to avoid wetland crossings, obviously, that's our intent, and then to provide a loop so that you have not a cul-de-sac with 2 lane of highway going around and then making an intersection. And we can do that. And we did seek input from the fire department, the DPW, and then we did seek input from the Conservation Commission. Each of the boards said, yeah, okay, you can do this plan too. Nobody thought it was preferable, and I think you might, do you have the communication from those different departments?
We do. I did hear from Conservation.
Did you hear from the fire department? I have that.
I believe Kirk did, so I know that we're...
Did you give them the fire department one?
Yeah.
Okay. So the fire department basically said that it thought that this single lane was sufficient for access for its fire vehicles. You know, if you wanted to put in the loop, I mean, it's obviously safe as well, but wherein lies the benefit? Because a fire truck can shove any tree that might fall over aside and go through. It's a ramming vehicle for the most part a lot of times. They have ramming vehicles in rural communities like this. So essentially, we did show that we can loop the road. And what we're looking for is for the board to tell us, do you really want us to go forward, loop the road, and create our subdivision? Because we will do that. We have not done that. You know, we would prefer to go forward with the plan we had, with the lengthier...
I don't see the gain in it personally.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion.
And we did hear from Conservation, they seem to think there was more benefits from the original proposal that you put forward.
It's less impervious area, sure.
Heard back from Highway as well, and they actually preferred the original, saying that this wouldn't benefit.
Well, if I can comment on that, I mean, I don't like this plan either. I mean, you're creating more roadway, and, you know, it's already a lot of roadway in the initial plan. This really greatly increases that unnecessary. And, I mean, you would have homes with a road in front and a road in back, if that's what we're talking about. That's not very desirable situation for anyone. But it doesn't, if you're trying to get around the cul-de-sac rule or the need for emergency exit, it doesn't do it because you still have only one way to get in and out of
It already exists. There's an existing road that exists. So currently, this is where it is. I mean, that is where the roadway goes. So essentially, you've already done it.
Well, as a factual matter, though, under this revised configuration, there's still only one way to get in and out of this
There
development.
always was, there always will be. The tail lane will never have more than that.
But it was not a development. It's a one-lane road right now to one house.
It's an existing street, and we're not extending this particular configuration. Does not increase the length of any road you have in your town. None. The other one does, and this does. Again, there needs to be, the reason for the cul-de-sac is safety. The reason for this particular subdivision, the reason why it comes in this way is because we need to pass the land that you want in order to do it. The other land lies somewhere around 2 miles out to create a roadway to extend up. Emergency vehicles can access this. There's absolutely no impediment to going through. None. And that's what your fire department, your DPW has told us. We are simply here because you would ask us, okay, look at, before we even consider approving a waiver to the length of a cul-de-sac, show us your alternative analysis. And that is truly what we intended to do, is show you what is a viable alternative. I mean, it does create more roadway, of course.
Well, scheme 2 lacks imagination, and scheme 1 lacks some imagination, so. But the thing you should do, because it's confusing, is change the name of the project.
We just haven't done that yet, the fog, because all the...
Because there's already a Fox Meadows in
No, we
town.
intended to change it, and we just didn't change it for this iteration.
Well,
That's all.
Somebody's going to come up with a good name.
Yeah, I think we're going to go for something like with the orchard because of the orchard on the side, but we wanted to have more conversations, honestly, with Kirk about it because we don't want to have the same issue where we're going to have the wrong name again. So we think it probably would be getting something more historic with the site. That's why. So essentially what we wanted to do is present you with this particular configuration, explain to you that we are going to require a waiver of the length of roadway. The only way to do that is to actually create this particular configuration. We can, I guess, because it would be used for access, of course you can create crossings, but that means infringing upon the area that otherwise is going to be given to the town. And nobody really wants that if there's not a legitimate safety reason for that. So we showed a, if you will, configuration and an extension and a loopy road that, while I agree somewhat interferes with some of the conservation-minded people because you do have to kind of come close to buffers, but we didn't cross any wetland, which was intentional when we did it. Because we wanted to provide you truly with a viable alternative that didn't require more impact to the natural environment.
Sir? Please, yeah.
So I'm Bernie Cullen, I'm one of the commissioners for the Water Board, and I'm here officially as the representative of the Water Board.
Great.
So we have a couple of questions. The last meeting I attended here, I think Larry raised the issue about can you hear me okay?
I'm listening, and it's a little hard, but I'm okay.
I'll try and speak louder. So one issue that Larry raised was the length of the water system that was being proposed. And the Water Board has an issue with any additional dead ends on our system at all. It's not just this development, but we already have too many, and it's an issue for the town, it's an issue for the water department. So that is a big concern. So we'd like to see some kind of workaround on that. And that ties into the next question, which is tied to yield. And that is, we haven't had an opportunity to look at what the demand, the increased demand would be for this development in this particular location on our system. And last night, we actually put in motion a process by having some of our engineers look at what that demand might be and what the implications, whether we could legitimately support the development of this size and any other kind of proximate development given the existing configuration of the system that we have. So we really need to kind of hope that there's no final decision made at this point that would commit us, in terms of the yield plan, that would commit us to supplying something that we can't supply. So we thank Larry for raising the issue. We hadn't seen it. Now we have seen it. We want to try and move forward in conjunction with whatever input Larry might have or anybody else might have.
We've absolutely going to comply with all of the water withdrawal demands and any licensure you may have with regard to your whichever basin. Which basin are you in? The Ipswich or which?
Yes, that's not the issue. The issue is the size of the pipes in that vicinity on Weathersfield Street and whether we can actually supply the water at the appropriate pressure.
And we have to, as you know, we have to test and we have to make sure the PFS on those pipes is sufficient because we need to be able to provide, we have to put in hydrants, we have to do a lot of things, we have to change a certain amount of pressure. It's pretty unusual to be able to get pressure. But, I've yet to see a subdivision ever have an issue that they can't develop water in some fashion. And that may be an improvement. It is what it is.
So we're in this game at this point to understand what we expect.
As in the ordinary course, any conditions and approvals we would issue would be subject to the applicant obtaining the water department's approval to build as well. So the applicants would have to be mindful of whatever your requirements are. Good. So, oh, sir.
No.
So I believe did we already look at a traffic study on this?
Not yet.
No, we still, we're going to give you, because we have to finalize, now that we have.
I know we looked at the intersection, but we didn't really, we are going to consider what that impact is going to be. I do think it's a little attenuated to say that we need them to study what's going to happen out on Route 1. I mean, I recognize there's going to be some impact there. There's also going to be an impact on Haverhill Street and Dodge Street, and yet we can only ask them to look at the impact on that neighborhood.
45.
Potentially 45. Okay. And it's a 90-acre parcel, right?
Oh, this,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very, very large parcel.
Right.
95 actually, we increased it.
Ma'am?
I'm just curious how this is going with the outline district mission of being low impact and low density. It just seems like adding potentially 60 more houses onto a very dangerous area. Outlines seems to be going off the path. There's a lot more development going down the street, power plant, and seems like an awful lot of activity in this small area.
Well, this is an application that'll come in pursuant to an open space residential development, which does mean that we're allowing higher density in consideration for the applicant donating a considerable amount of, in this case, land that the town finds desirable.
A question about that too. Isn't it supposed to be impermeable land and not?
And it is. Open space would be open space.
So that would.
Mr. Chairman, we're not actually, or if the board approves this, it's not actually allowing higher density, in my view. It would be allowing more condensed. On the same plots.
Probably a better way to state it.
I'm going to call it a cluster development. But the basic density standard for this development, as well as any development in the outline district, is 60,000 square feet of land for each lot, and that's what this density is based on.
So it actually means that.
Right.
All right. So I know one of Mr. Graham's larger concerns has been the secondary access here, and whether there is any possibility that there be even a fire road that would provide secondary access in case of some kind of an emergency that we're anticipating or not anticipating, but would concern ourselves with is something that would block that roadway.
And again, it can happen on any part of a loop road as well. But as far as that goes, of course it can be. But the issue is what's the value of it, and it will come through what you are going to have as your preferred area of, if you will, open space. So can it happen? Yes, it can. Is it necessary? And I think what you're hearing from is I suppose you could have more detailed conversations with the fire department, but it's basically saying to you, there isn't a need to do that. There are other things you can do to provide. For example, you have, your fire hydrants at every certain place. You make sure that your fire department is equipped with extensive equipment that gets through rural areas. You fight fires in the middle of a forest, and you got to get through, and there's one way in usually. So you do have that type of branding equipment, as does, again, most rural communities. As far as this particular subdivision goes, you can put in emergency push pin. We didn't because, based on our conversations with everybody who is involved with the conservation aspect, they don't want us to cross them. I mean, we can. It'd be another culvert, though. That's what it would require. And again, what is the benefit? Truly, I mean, I understand what your rules say, but that's also why there's, waivers. And what is, really a legitimate concern at this stage of the town.
Larry, do you want to, I know that this is an issue that you've raised, so if you would just explain where your concern is coming from.
Well, I think it's been stated what the concern is. As Jill said, it's more or less safety, and most planning board rules and regulations, you'll see anywhere from 500 to 1,500 feet of dead-end cul-de-sac is the maximum limit, and Raleigh happens to be at the 500-foot level. The references this evening, I think, to the fire department and their take on this, I think the board should follow up and have the fire department give the board a letter that says what Jill has stated this evening for the record.
There is an email. It's not a very. I actually discussed it with him today. But, essentially what Joe is saying is correct. But there is an email that he sent, but it's not a formal.
Well, we haven't got to a formal stage on this anyway.
No, but I think just reflecting on the length of the cul-de-sac, and I think the board should also request one from the DPW, and I think the DPW should also the highway.
They did send me, and that should be in everyone's package. Should be.
And those are, I do have letters.
And they should also be very much aware that the applicant or Jill has stated that the applicant proposes this to be a town road that will be accepted by the town, that will be maintained 100% by the town. Yep. And if that's still the objective here, I think the highway department needs to realize that from the get-go here. They may not know that this is not a private development, and that may. And that may, in fact, have some bearing on what their take on this. And then lastly, the water, which has already been stated this evening, that's down the road, but it looks like there's no other way. It's going to be a dead end. It's going to be a dead end with a lollipop loop on the end. And the water commissioner is going to have to take a look at supplying enough pressure and flow here to satisfy both the domestic and the fire requirements for 45 lots. And the developer is going to have to size the pipe to provide the pressure that's needed for fire and domestic use. I have a couple of other things that I'd like to mention. One is I'd like to request the developer to provide a plan which shows where the 34.4 acres of wetland is. It's not, there is no plan which has been provided that shows me where that 34.4 acres of wetland is.
I'm very
34.4 acres. I want to see the calculation for 34.4 acres, and I'm sure that you're going to find that it's going to be your 200-foot riverfront area and the spokes of the wetland which extend out from that. But there is no plan that shows me that.
This plan right here shows it.
No, there's not one plan that shows me that. There is an indication right there on that plan of 34.4 acres. But
I have to admit, I don't understand. Do you mean there's no wetland delineation plan? Or
there is a wetland delineation plan, and there is a plan which shows the 200-foot riverfront area, but there is no plan that shows and a calculation that shows how they got it from either Donahoe or ASB.
Oh, you want the report, the wetland report. You don't just want the plan.
I want a plan that shows me where the limits of that wetland that come up to the.
I don't understand what you're saying because it's clearly marked out, and that's why I'm honestly asking the question because here is all the descriptions and it basically says here's the limit of the wetland.
All right. All right. Let me ask you then.
And I will get it for you.
Okay. But the ASB plan says total riverfront area 27.89 acres, 28 acres.
Yes.
You've got 34.4 acres.
Yes.
You got more. You got 6 or 7 acres more than the riverfront area. I suspect that is the little fingers that go out front.
And it is.
But it's not on a plan, and there's no
Oh, you just
calculation
wanted to-
from Donahoe that gives me that.
Okay, do you
Okay.
want, you want him to call out the actual wetland that exists outside the riverfront, or you want the total?
I want the total wetland area, which is 34.4 acres, shown and given to the board with a calculation from Donahoe or something, that's because we're all working based on 34.4 acres of wetland. That's what your sheet calculations use and what I've used and the board is using to come up with how many, what's the percentage of wetland in the total tract and in the open space. So that 34.4 acres is a significant number that needs to be verified. And there's no plans that you've submitted that tell me that or show me that.
I disagree, but I'll have him put on the plan that I know the wetland area is the difference, it was 6 point something acres. I can have that put on the plan.
Okay. Well, that's one thing. And then, lastly, I sent a email to the chair and the planner with respect to the yield plan. I don't know where this meeting's going tonight, but it's my interpretation that the board must consider a waiver of the cul-de-sac length for both the yield plan and the preliminary plan.
Right.
Based on how I read the.
But we already had this discussion.
Yeah, but
with the private meeting.
I don't mean to, I thought we did
We did.
get over that hurdle at the last meeting.
We actually approved the yield plan, Larry, at the last meeting.
I thought that the last meeting, it was concluded that you did not need the waiver.
They basically said they didn't think they needed to provide a waiver on the yield plan and voted to accept the yield plan.
I'm suggesting that, I don't know that they did vote to accept the yield plan, but I'm suggesting that the rules and regulations read that the board should consider and must give a waiver to accept the yield plan that is not in keeping with a conventional subdivision.
So I don't want, I mean, as much as I want to be consistent with the rules here, I believe we have taken a vote, and in fact, it was that vote that was conditional, our yield count was conditioned on those last 4 perk tests that you confirmed today. So if you're saying that vote was faulty, well, that's an issue, but I'm not sure we have to go back and do it again.
I'll just reference the reference in the regulations is 6441B for the yield plan and 6442 for the preliminary plan.
Okay, and good. Ma'am, she's been asking for
Because
floor.
we did have an extension.
My question is, as far as the waiver for the length of it. We live on Harrison Circle, we haven't had to have a waiver for the length, the tightness of the loop in the back. The waiver was granted, and somebody purchased one of the house lots there, and probably about 15 to 20 years after that, somebody applied to put a street into ours crossing wetlands. The town turned them down, and the state overrode them, and we're dealing with it now because we have a very narrow end, and I've almost been clipped half a dozen times. So we have to be careful giving a waiver because there's nothing that says someone's not going to come along 10, 15 years from now and want to connect to this development, crossing other wetlands, which is what they did come into our development, and it's caused a major problem, a safety issue on our street because of the waiver that was originally given. These things need to be looked at because they happen over years that people don't remember.
So it's just the unintended consequences, and we do need to be mindful.
At the time that the development was done, they did that waiver without ever thinking that this would happen. We had horrible water issues and everything because that waiver was given in the first place.
That's not quite the waiver we're considering in this instance, but nonetheless, I think the point.
The street is longer than it normally would be. The town says the street cannot be longer than a certain length. What's to say that somewhere down the way, somebody doesn't want to cross one of those other wetlands, and even if the town turns it down, the person goes to the state and they overrode that, and we ended up with it even though the town voted it down.
So we haven't really accepted it.
It happens all the time,
Yeah.
and that's the problem, is that we can't count on what people are going to do 10 years from now when they decide they want to develop that other piece over there, and they want to cross our wetlands. The
Well-
state still has the authority to override us.
So in fact, we are asking this developer to consider a couple of locations on their plan to stub out access for subsequent subdivision. We don't know what's going to happen there, but we are planning where those connections would ultimately come in if they were to come in.
Which you're required to do by the way.
Yes.
Then it's a good thing I'm asking them to do it. So the unintended consequences, we're foreseeing those and we're locating where that would happen.
Environmental group said no, town said no, everybody said no, and we went to the state, we got the state.
When did this
override our
happen?
vote.
When did this happen?
Our street was built in '85, and the new street went in about 15 years later.
The reason
The
is
rules
it's a
are
limited
different now.
project.
The state can still override.
Well, very rarely.
Well, that's what they told us back then, but it never did.
And yet that dilemma, I mean, I understand what you're saying, they narrowed the radius of the cul-de-sac, and that created a different kind of problem, at least the analogy of unintended consequences, well, placed, but we're not dealing with that specific issue, so, I'm not sure it's entirely.
Down the road, someone's going to want to develop, there's going to want to cross that, and there was again.
Well, the town's going to own that section if this goes through, so you don't have to worry about that. And
the town will
own that, so.
The green space will be owned by the town.
Yeah, but we own it, so, I mean, the town would own it.
Cross that again, but.
What if somebody buys another house lot, says about something to that in it? That's what happened on our street. Somebody bought the house lot.
We're hoping for another road coming in.
They wanted to bring the street through, and they then wanted that to be the roadway, and turned down by everybody in this town, every conservation, everything. And the state overruled us, and we ended up with it anyways.
We'll take it into consideration.
Let me move this along.
Yes, so where would you like to go from here?
So what we would like to do is actually entertain a site walk because we think it's important for you to see the quality of the land that you're going to be getting. We also want to show you, the roadway. We'll show you where we'll stub and connect in both instances so that you can see what the relative benefit would be. And then I think it's beneficial too because it's possible maybe we could even invite the fire department and the DPW to come out because we did have conversations with both of those entities and the DPW most certainly understands that it would be responsible for maintaining this road and would greatly prefer to do a lesser amount of road than a greater amount of road. And the fire department basically, as you know, I gave you the second set. He basically just said that there's absolutely no benefit from this small amount of looping. Safety-wise, it isn't additive. So that would give you the opportunity as well. Maybe we could have them come out with us if we could invite them. Is that typical, Kirk? Can we do that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, whether we can coordinate it all to happen at once or not.
Yeah, sometimes the fire department will come out, but I don't know if that's the typical practice. We can ask, but that is something we would like to do because we would love to be able to begin the process of laying stuff out so that we can finalize the open space, so that we can finalize the roadway design, and then we can give to you a definitive plan. And those things really do require a little direction relative to the waiver on the street line.
Okay.
Bless you.
Want to talk about a date for that site visit then?
Anybody know the weather forecast?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's New England. Who knows? I mean, we're willing to whenever the town is available, we'll make ourselves available.
Can we do?
Take out the roadways before.
Oh yeah, both.
Saturday.
We'll take out
There
points.
were some on Saturday.
All the applicable points, absolutely.
You
And
walked around
obviously,
through the
we'll stake out even
Yeah,
the front,
it's beautiful.
even though it's pretty much where Taylor Lane goes in, we'll still do it. And then we'll show where we have that turnaround for the fire department. So absolutely, yep. And we can even,
Try to do it soon when you know the
is we
weather.
do have, we already put those connections
new
on because we did,
warm
at the
coat
very
for
first
Christmas.
meeting, we actually talked about it. And we'll show you where the connectors are.
Good.
Because we're required, we had to have, remember we had that conversation, we had to have this connection here because Taylor Lane actually connects here, and by law, this property is burdened by that easement already. I have no choice but to do it. Did you really want me to look up the weather?
I was joking. I got a new coat for Christmas.
So why don't we look at not next week, but the week after? We're same parameters, Tuesday to Thursday after 3?
22nd, 23rd, 24th.
Yes, these
I'm
folks.
here.
Yeah. Again, let me think about that. Is the public welcome at a site visit?
It's a private
property. So it would be at the invite of the
If we had ownership over it, I would say, yeah, we don't. I don't know that I can really grant it over 3 different people's properties for having people walk it because it's fairly untrained.
In that case, probably not.
No.
But will that raise the question of the butters? Because I would certainly like to go on.
You can go as a selectman.
But I'm not, no, I can't go as select.
We can invite you.
As an abutter.
No.
Could you inquire about getting?
I can ask, but I can't grant that permission without it. I mean, because none of these people are covered by any
I
insurance.
understand.
And I've had an issue where somebody fell and broke an ankle before, so I get a little sensitive.
They don't have to give permission for, I mean, the planning board has a right to be
Oh,
there.
you do. All your boards do.
But the private owner can
Does
say
not
no
have
to
to.
it. So it only complicates it to actually try to.
Sure. No,
I
and
mean,
I
I understand
understand
the
that.
desire to do it, but it complicates trying to set up the meeting. We've got to get the
So
fire.
it really is for liability purposes that they're unable to offer that invitation. So I think it is going to be just limited to the board.
Like when we did the Raleigh Country Club, we allowed the butters because it was literally, there was nothing fearful. You know, it was all open area. This is
Wooded.
Yeah.
wooded. Yeah, this is not.
And they have to trust us.
So what date are you looking at?
I think it was the 22nd, 23rd, 24th.
That's the 23rd, Wednesday?
Yeah, that's Wednesday.
23rd. What time?
3:30?
2:30 is good for me.
3:30.
3:30. It's going to get dark.
3:30. Oh, well, you're right. It might get dark on us. 3.
3. It's supposed to get lighter now.
We'll get an extra 10 minutes by
We
then.
park at the dangerous corner.
The 23rd.
I'll confirm with the fire chief.
That's next week, which is what, the 17th.
May I ask the board, would it be acceptable to you if we ask the Conservation Commission to attend as well?
Absolutely.
The whole conservation.
The 16th. 16th.
They believe if they put into them and try and get the open space, I think they'd like to see what we're doing, so if it's okay with the board, I'd like to invite them as well.
It's okay.
Makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
All the members.
I think if we just invite them all, we're going to have fun, but at least the
I assume Brent has already been out there.
I'm sorry.
Brent has already been out there.
Say so.
He'll be.
Brent lives up there.
He said he branded himself
No,
with
we-
a crown of thorns.
I'll have to check
I
with
think he's, hey, huh?
getting all those parties together makes it cool.
That's why I said it.
So, does anybody else has any questions about this particular application? Okay, so at this point, we're going to schedule the site visit for the 23rd at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
At the site. We're going to continue. I guess I'll make a motion to continue this hearing to our next regular meeting on the 13th of February.
Oh, good. I heard you say something in January. We'll
No,
make that.
we're
Okay.
good for the 13th.
Absolutely.
I'll make
that'd be
that
fine.
motion to continue it to the 13th of February.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for
Stay
your help
warm, by
today.
the way. Is it?
All right, so the next item on the agenda is a review of an A&R plan submitted by Star and Dorothy Todd. So we have the applicant.
I was wondering, what, the Miss Berkowitz and Tom Beatrice and and a few others have actually.
That's fine. That's fine.
I just wonder if we might be able to actually deal with.
The only reason I was going to hit it was because it was scheduled.
Yeah, and I think is.
Ms. Starr, you okay? We can put you off for. Ms. Starr, would it be okay if we dealt with one other issue first and then came to you in 10 minutes?
Would that be?
That would be me.
Thank you.
How long have you been waiting? Have you been here from the start?
8:15.
Since 8:15. Yeah, I guess it would be either way. I was only thinking about because the other people had been here from the start, and then their other related item was pushed to the end. So we're making it sick, but I think you've gone through the same.
I think we'll be brief.
I know. I feel like.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just proceed with the A&R.
Okay. Good. I'm sorry, Ms. Starr. We're gonna call your matter. Mr. Thank you. So, do you have that plan, Kirk?
Yeah, the actual plan. I have the plans here, and then everybody has a copy.
Okay.
Of the A&R plan.
Come up.
A&R plan pertains to 245 Main Street, map 26, lot 25-1, owned by Starr and Dorothy Todd.
Okay, good. So you're simply asking us to approve a plan for a lot that conforms otherwise with all the required...
Correct. My name is Bill Dufresne with Merrimack Engineering. This land was conveyed to them in '07 by a plan done by Port Engineering. It's Lot 2 and Lot 1. Lot 2 is approximately twice the size of Lot 1, and I don't know what consideration was given into how they created the lot lines, but they've recently decided to market the land for sale and felt it's in their best interest to get it permitted and approved for construction. So they engaged my office to do so. In doing that, we found a local wetland on the front of Lot 1, which precludes us from accessing the rear and upland portion of that lot. So we're simply asking to relocate the lot line between Lot 1 and Lot 2 so as they have upland access to Lot 1, and the plan in front of you represents that lot line relocation. Both lots still conform with the central zoning district. It's an A&R plan for a lot line relocation.
Is this a drainage ditch that comes through there and goes under the road?
No, it's actually an isolated ditch. It was man-dug. It's isolated. It doesn't even qualify as a wetland under the state regulations, but it does under your local bylaw. There is I know what you're referring to, there is a ditch that crosses the road. This is not connected to that.
Okay. I know this one too.
Yeah. It was man-dug, and the spillings from it are just piled up. It's like a little canal or moat.
Okay.
This is the road that goes.
Gotcha. So Lot X is going from Lot 2 to Lot 1, all right? Or from 1 to 2?
Yeah, a portion of what is Lot 1 is being transferred to Lot 2, so the Lot 2A results in being 45,934 square feet.
Gotcha.
Then Lot A will, Lot 1A will become 57,482 square feet.
Central District?
Central District.
Okay.
125 feet frontage requirement. They meet that on both lots. They also meet the, 30,000
minimum lot size.
Lot area.
Looks good to me.
So they couldn't understand, and we can't understand how it was drawn before. Right? It's better this way.
Yeah, I don't know what consideration they gave to it at all, but certainly they didn't look at wetlands. They didn't balance the two lots. This balances the lots better and gives dry access to Lot 2.
Good.
Make a motion.
Yeah, we approve the...
Yeah, we approve the lot line change.
As a approval not required.
Approval not required. Second.
So John made the motion. Troy seconded it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good. So you have plans?
Yes.
Are they like us to sign?
Yeah, we submit the Mylar.
Okay. We'll take a look on the way. Okay.
We'll slide it out.
Thank you. Yeah. I think we made the right call there. Okay. So the next item we are going to address is regards to the decommissioning bond for the Rowley Solar Facility at 623 Weathersfield Street and the TRA compliance check update. So I think the first issue we'd like to just deal with is the decommissioning bond. The order that was approved required that at this point in the progress that before you commence to erect the panels that we get a bond in place, and I see you've got some estimates.
Yeah, everybody should have this at the very, it's towards the very end. And I did want to say that I guess what we dealing with is the actual dollar amount, but I did talk to town council in regards to the instrument and the format. He stated that the a letter of credit would be the most appropriate, would be what would be preferred. And so what they would do is the bonding company would produce a draft letter of credit for the amount with the appropriate contingency clause that goes with that kind of letter. They would submit it to us. We'd refer it over to town council for review, and he would give us confirmation that it was valid.
All right, good. So now we really trying to determine the value of the letter of credit.
Yeah.
And in coming to that, I know we've had our technical review agent take a look at it and try to come up with some figures, and I know they have too. So why don't we start with Mr. Graham? You want to tell us what your thoughts are on this?
There's another thing that was another condition. I don't want it to be overlooked besides the bonding for prior to panel erection, and that was condition C1, which asks the applicant to provide the board with panel dimensions, rack dimensions, panel rack support details, panel rack heights, and panel rack angles in horizontal and vertical direction of glare, and the panel rack row spacing. Those things have not, as far as I know, been given to the board. That's condition C1. Condition C2, I think, has been addressed by the Conservation Commission agent as the project is unfolded and continued, and then condition C3 is the bond. This is my first experience with a solar project like this. I reviewed what was submitted by, say the name of the company, Invalian by Mr. Murphy, and it appeared that what was proposed as far as the decommissioning process seemed to generally cover what I would expect the activities to be for that. I didn't have any information with respect to the numbers of panels and so forth that he gave us. He gave us quantities in units, feet, weight, and then an estimate of labor and equipment costs to break it down, remove the equipment, restore the site. My first take on it was that it looked extremely low as far as a number to really take this site apart and to restore it. I initially was thinking of just coming up with a factor to add to that, and then Kirk Baker was able to come up with a couple of examples from the town of Newberry, and also I believe a regulation in Nathal that provided some cost estimates. So instead of adding that factor, I looked at the Newberry and the Athol numbers that they gave for different megawatts of solar sites and what those costs were. and I did just a direct proportion based on the Maven site, and came up with a number of about $93,000 comparing it to Newberry, and $115,000 comparing it to the AFL regulation. So I suggest to the board that you consider somewhere in between that, maybe on the order of $105,000. That's vastly different, I know, from Mr. Murphy's estimate here, and I'm sure he wants to talk to that. Also recommended that perhaps whatever the bond amount you decide on, it be reviewed every 5 years, and then have a condition that it can be reviewed every 5 years, and the bond amount could be adjusted based on the review of the current industry standard cost. Aside from doing it that way, I have to go back in and educate myself on what he proposed to do, and I think that's going to take too long for them, because they're wanting to get themselves in a position to erect the panels. So that's the option that I suggest to the board.
Can I ask you, did your estimate take into account a salvage value?
No.
Okay. So, if you wouldn't mind, how you formulated your numbers?
Yeah, hi, TJ Murphy and Bailey on Solar. So we simply pretty much went through the same process that Larry went through. We do this quite often for jobs that we have to provide a decommissioning bond on. So we go off historical values of what other people are assessing at what the removal cost would be to remove a system. So we take that into consideration, and I provided you with a chart there that kind of shows what some other towns have done recently, as well as the Newberry job. So when you look at that and you consider the scrap value and you figure it out on a per megawatt basis, I've provided you with those average numbers. And then when you subtract the scrap value, which is obviously an important factor in this, although you can't really, I guess, estimate what that's going to be worth in 25 years. It could be a very large amount. It could be nothing. So it's purely speculative. So we're prepared to kind of figure out how to deal with that. That's not super important at this point. But those numbers you see now are basically what other towns have put in place and accepted as a decommissioning bond value. And on a per megawatt basis, we've come up with an average of about 22,000 per megawatt. So Raleigh is a 2 megawatt site, DC. So we would estimate that bond would be around $40,000. I think we provided a bond initially estimate at $30,000, which was using more of what we've issued in the past for bonds to other towns.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
TJ, I see that you are looking at the Newberry as being 5.21 megawatts.
That's right.
The information that Kirk had sent me, I thought was they were at a little under 2.795 or something. So that's
the Yes Air project.
prorated.
That's the KV Yes Air project. It's 5.2 DC.
All right. So these numbers are what other towns have accepted based on more or less your
That's
own
correct.
calculations. I noticed that Mr. Graham's number is about 105 compared to what you're saying is somewhere in the neighborhood of 45. Mr.
That's
Graham's
correct.
calculations don't take into account the scrap value, which you're estimating at a megawatt per megawatt of. What are you estimating per megawatt? You're kind of 15,000, 26,000, 6,000.
Yeah, it's roughly, it's about half the value.
Okay. So, if we were to take Mr. Graham's high estimate, subtract out your scrap, we're still at about 80,000. I mean, I don't know how we necessarily arrive at a final figure here, but I think that would,
Well, I think
it would be conservative from this board's perspective, but would also take into account what you think is going to be a.
we're willing to work with you to figure out the right number. You tell us what that number, you think needs to be, and we'll work with you.
While we're going through this, let me just address a comment from Eric Peterson.
Answer the question. This bond, I'm Dave Peterson from Blueberry Road, but also the Board of Selectmen, although I'm here representing myself. On this bond, if the facility fails in 25 years, who is actually taking this down? Is it the property owner, or is it the responsibility of the town?
That would be covered by the bonding company. They would be responsible for providing that service.
So the bonding company would hire a contractor to pay all the costs, and if the costs are more than
that is the definition.
They take that as a loss. Is that the way it works?
That is the definition of a bond. Yes, correct.
Just to make sure that
Is that even if it's done as a letter, right?
preventive wages and all the rest of it.
We've run into that, absolutely. Right.
When that hopefully will never occur, but thank you.
Okay, so. Okay. I mean, I do think there's a concern that if we were to start with a number of even 100,000, for the reasons Mr. Peterson mentioned, prevailing wages, we don't know where this is going to end up. The other thing is, in terms of what we're asking you to decommission, decommission the solar array, disassemble it. But we also had a provision that you restore the site to its prior condition, which sounds to me like it would require some additional material be brought on site to fill, maybe clean topsoil. I don't know. I don't notice your.
No, well, initially it says that if the road stays in place, and the drainage and the effects stay in place. So that's staying still, and then basically it's restoring where the array area is, which essentially decommissioning these systems isn't super difficult. You're pulling a screw out of the ground and you're scrapping the rack. I mean, literally, you watch how fast an excavator can rip down a house. It takes about 3 hours. So you can pull apart these systems pretty quickly. And you have to extract, everything's in conduit in the ground at this location, so extracting the underground is pretty simple as well, and there's really not that much of it actually. So it's not as daunting of a task as it sounds like. It's certainly a lot harder to build it. And then number two, the soils underneath the system, they're natural as it is. They're just going to be revegetated and in a natural state. So once you pull the screws out and remove the rack, it's a natural state. Throw some grass seed out and plant some trees, and you're back to natural.
The machines and stuff are going to track across. You're going to disturb topsoil. It's a little more intense than just.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
it is, but you basically just reseed and.
Correct, but there's grading involved, and it's not just pulling it out. You'll be tracking excavators across, like you just said.
Minimal amount of grading. I mean, the track work.
Do we need more
Mr. Chairman?
info
Yes.
from other?
With all respect to what he said, that the bond company would actually do the removal, that's not my understanding.
I'm still digesting that myself. I mean, I thought the bond ensured that.
It is surety that there is sufficient coverage that any contractor would be compensated to perform that scope of
Yeah,
work.
the contractor would be the town. In that case, as Dave said, the requirement to get the prevailing wage would kick in. Also, if you're going to give credit to the scrap metal, you just said that it's highly speculative and
Sure.
maybe worth nothing 20 years down the road or whatever.
Right.
So,
I mean, the one thing to add that all the components are single metallic material, so i.e. the screws, the racking are either solid aluminum or solid steel, so this is extremely highly recyclable, including the copper wire. That commodity price continues to rise.
And does the bond that you're proposing have any escalation or adjustment for inflation?
That's built into our calculations.
Right, gotcha. Well, okay, so let's just start from the top on this. If we were to request that the applicant obtain a $105,000 decommissioning bond, would you agree with that proposal?
How about 80?
All right, now we're talking.
Is there really a need to negotiate? I mean, considering that
Maybe 20 years down the road, prevailing wage.
They're paying the cost.
You don't know who's going to be hazardous waste. I want to ensure that, I mean, the rate of inflation of prevailing wage, I'm seeing what it's taking to put them in. I know to take them out, it's probably quicker, but, you know, they're 1 field, 3 weeks later. It's a long process. I could give an estimate, I'm thinking 200,000.
No.
Just throwing numbers out there. All right.
Can I state
there's
one thing?
200,000 on the floor.
So based upon our
25,000.
based upon our calculations, the same formatted numbers have been accepted. We've done a lot of work in Reading, Holyoke, a lot of the municipally owned power entities. These are the same numbers that we have provided to them in recent year.
But none of these bonds have actually been called in.
I'm sorry?
Have any of these bonds for the town's been called in?
There's no reason to. There are companies right now offering to pay money because I mean, you have to look at that scrap value. We see the rare earth elements, why our electronic costs are going up. These are pure aluminum, pure steel, and pure copper. They have the highest salvage value.
It still fluctuates.
I mean, salvage value fluctuates. I mean, you're not going to disagree with that, right? Up, down.
I'm sorry.
Salvage values, they fluctuate all the time.
That is correct, but we cannot assume that it's a zero value.
No.
What are the panels constructed out of?
It's sand and glass and aluminum.
So the sand and glass, that's not recyclable. What do you do with that?
That the manufacturers are required to take back.
Does the board really need to get into all the minutia of having to deal with that?
We don't have to.
Yeah, I mean,
I just say we have an estimate, a solid estimate from our technical review agent who has looked into it and who's come up with an estimate.
Either we wait for 2 weeks to our next meeting, or we say 100,000.
First, Mr. Beatrice has a question.
I saw the comparables that TJ had submitted. I guess I'm curious as to where Mr. Graham's comparable came from. Did I hear a regulation in Athol and then just one project in Newbury? That's where that's coming from?
Yeah.
And we still haven't determined the actual size of that project?
All right, we can wait until our next.
And that's where we're at, it sounds like. And I understand, you're saying we're just looking at this now. We're looking at this now because the order says that before you advance to the next phase, that we look at this.
The reason why I asked it is only because we started at that high ceiling of 105,000.
Right.
I understand this.
May I suggest one thing? We'd offered to pull a bond in the higher limit, granted that the town will revisit that, because our constraint right now is timeline and construction. While we move through construction and reconvene at a later date to reevaluate if that could be potentially brought down.
So I think from what I'm hearing from our technical review agent, and consistent with Mr. Beatrice's point that he's only looked at 2 projects as comps, he'd like more time to come up with different. If the numbers were to change, we'd need more time to get to that point. If what you're saying is you'll take the higher number today, if we revisit it down the road, sure. I think Mr. Graham's already suggested that we revisit this periodically over time. But if there's also another threshold at which we'll revisit it, perhaps completion, I don't know.
We're amicable to that. Yeah. I mean, our goal, so we employ about 66 electricians locally in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and here in the North Shore. If we halt construction, I have to lay people off.
Sure. That's why we made sure you're on the agenda tonight.
But I would wonder, if we do revisit it, get more data, and it has to go up, that's a possibility as well.
Yes. Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So the question is, start with the 105. How quickly do you want to revisit it?
I would say at the completion of construction.
Okay.
And that would give us time to do more research.
No, that's way too.
I mean, keeping in mind what they just said, we're going to do some more.
I would want to stop here. You're doing a good job. I would say that. I watch it every day.
Good. So it can go up or down.
Yeah. I'm not thinking as a buyer, I'm thinking as a taxpayer and citizen, what's it going to cost me in commission? I mean, I see
field. And once you get lost, I mean, that's man hours, so, I mean, listen.
Well, coming down goes a lot quicker. But that being said, and Mr. Peterson's mentioned it, you've mentioned it, I think what we're all kind of ending up on is 105, revisit, and that could go up or down. And you know, we're going to ask Mr. Graham to take a look at some other projects to determine what makes sense as well. Okay? So
that sounds great to us. We'll go ahead and get the letter of credit and the verbiage that will enact that letter of credit, if ever need be, in front of your attorney tomorrow.
Mr. Graham, does that sound reasonable?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like your project's going to be completed within months? Month? So we could be revisiting this issue?
Beginning of March would be a likely time.
Good.
Is that, okay, good. Good. Yes?
Can we ask about
That's next. Okay. My feet are cold.
I did want to just bring up one other matter. Larry brought up the C1, C2, and C3. So I believe that the building plan that we reviewed had many of those dimensions, but we do have a more detailed panel construction plan set that I can provide to you. I'll provide those tomorrow. I'll drop them off at the town office. Just wanted to close that.
Thank you. And you know, I will just want to point out, and you're probably all aware of this, the only reason that was a condition is that you wanted the flexibility to go to different directions for your panel dimensions. And
That's right. And
so.
It's exactly what we thought it would be.
Okay. So, good. Then it's unfolding like it's supposed to.
Yes, that's correct.
We are a local company. We take a lot of responsibility in what we do. We're not out of state folks.
Well, good. And it's good that we have on-site people we can talk to today and get this resolved today. So that you
that's
can
great. Thank you.
Keep moving tomorrow, hopefully. I don't think we need to take a vote because it's not a.
I would, because we're settling on the bond amount. I mean, we
okay.
have to take a formal action to
I think he's probably right because we were supposed to determine a bond amount.
I make a motion that we accept the 105,000 bond amount and it be reviewed at either up or down at the end of construction.
And every 5 years?
And every 5 years thereafter.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. You're awesome. Got one more issue?
You guys are tough poker players.
Yeah, we did pretty good. So much for 80.
I'm trying to speed things up.
So we have on the same site, there's we have a compliance check because if everyone recollects the specific plan that was approved, we anticipated that the connection off of Weathersfield out to the solar array would be subsurface, and it seems like they've erected quite a few telephone poles up and over that right away.
For the record, Mr. Foley is here in relation to the waiting.
Terrific. I'm glad.
Definitely shed some light on this situation.
Okay, great.
I don't know if everybody's had a chance to see the pictures.
Down near the end.
And I can address after Dan explains his thoughts on the process. I'm happy to add comment,
Good.
what happened after that.
All right, so good. So if you wouldn't mind, I mean, I will say at the outset, it's a non-compliance. The plan that we approved has these items subsurface.
I think before Dan explains the situation, I would suggest to the board that we leave out the light in the telephone poles and the light poles are exempt from regulations. But I'll let Mr. Ford explain the plan.
Sure. Mr. Folden, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good.
I'm glad that news at this long.
Yeah, I understand.
I guess I'll start from the beginning. When this project came to me as a light department manager, we talked with the developer about the interconnection on the project. That is done as a system impact study with the light department and the developer paid for that study as part of the, how this project is going to affect the distribution system for the town level. So while doing that study, it was determined that the interconnection point is the last pole on the property, which is the sixth pole in line. When that study was done, all this was notated in that study before the development even went before you as a planning board to get that plan approved. And that is a purview of the light department to determine how that project is connected to the distribution system. And that was always discussed as overhead from the Weathersfield point to the connection point on the Copland for the development. So I'm not sure how we got to this point, but it was always understood in my end that I determined how the project is in connection to the system, and that was always to move ahead.
I think I wanted to just add a little more light to that too, just so everyone has an understanding of what this typical process looks like and what is that, what happened here as well along the way. So normally when you interconnect a solar project, as Dan said, it is the utility's purview to understand like how they're going to interconnect this, what types of products they use because they're used to using certain types of products. It's a safety factor. And then also for redundancy and reliability, in case something breaks, they have those products in stock and can replace them. And it's not a specialized item that they have to be trained on or understand just for one specific event. So that's kind of why the utilities are allowed to make the decision on how things interconnect. Normally when these sites get permitted, if it's going to be, determined that it should be underground or above ground, it's typically called out as a condition, and I don't think it was in this case. And we had a discussion after with Dan, and he explained to us how if they want to interconnect, we went ahead and built our construction plan accordingly. And then after we had our construction plan, part of the order of conditions was to review that construction plan to make sure that we were following the permit. We had that meeting with everybody present. Kirk was there, Larry was there, the light department was there, who else was there? Concom was there, the building inspector was there, and we did a page turn of the actual construction set, which clearly shows everything above ground. And that set was approved, and there was no issues raised. So I'm not understanding why it's being raised now.
Mr. Burns, thank you. And Mr. Cassiano, we understand we want to hear from a lot of people first, and we will. I can only say that, calling it out a condition, we have a plan that your engineer submitted that shows that service underground. And we approved that plan.
Again, it's the utilities' purview to determine how to interconnect.
So it's our purview to determine how the site's to be developed.
Safety-wise, being underground, you don't have to deal with the weather. You don't have to worry about tree branches falling down, and it's a safer system.
So
I worked as a telephone. I know what trees and cars and stuff do to poles. Right, it's a safer system underground, no matter how you look at it.
Did you look at the plan that was approved?
The plan was discussed. The construction plan I have shows overhead lines for six.
No,
It's not the approved planning board plan.
My purview is to deal with the developer on the construction aspect.
No, it isn't.
I don't deal with the planning board on a permit.
Right, and it's funny, when this issue came up and I found out Raleigh Light was involved with the placement of those poles, the first thing I thought was we don't need an interdepartment dispute about this. But the thing is, I think it is on the developer. The plan we approved had this subsurface. That's the approval. We gave a lot of consideration to it. I think Mrs. Graves and Mr. Cassiotis will tell you that the issue of whether these poles would be overhead or underground was foremost in their mind, and I know it was discussed at the meetings. So it was a consideration that weighed heavy in our determination. We were trying to do everything we could to mitigate the impact on the local neighborhood, and putting those poles subsurface was part of that mitigation, because there was a lot of objections to overcome.
50 feet apart to top it off.
And I think that the board's approval is pretty
clear.
Pretty clear on it, right?
Chairman, we're not suggesting the plan is not what the plan is, but the fact that the developer, Rowley liked this board's consultant, and the town planner, all of the meeting, I think should weigh in on how this
Yeah, I have to talk to that.
Sure that
I have to talk to that.
Okay, please.
we should kind of resolve it in a reasonable.
Yeah,
We have a very reasonable technical review agent that will.
Well, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Beatrice and TJ on that particular meeting. That meeting, as I recall, TJ, was really a meeting about getting started and what your sequence was, what your construction sequence was and was going to be. And you, I think properly, if it was the meeting you're talking about, Kirk was there, I was there, Brent was there, a representative of the light department, I'm sure it was you, or yeah. But I honestly don't recall ever seeing a set of plans at that meeting. And had I seen a set of plans, I would hope that you would have pointed out the difference of these utility poles being different from the plan that was approved by the planning board. And that was definitely not a part of the discussion that day. So respectfully, I suggest that there was no plan at that meeting. And had there been, that was a very important aspect of the project. It should have been pointed out to all of us to take back to the full board for their approval.
Right, Mr. Chairman, to go further with Larry's last thought, even if you had approved that, it would not be binding on the planning board. Our technical review agent can make field changes on his own decision, but this is certainly not a field change. This is a very drastic change in the site plan, and it's drastic because the whole purpose of your review of this facility was to prevent adverse visual impact on the butter. This greatly increases that visual impact, and I can't imagine what it's going to look like when they put the wires on.
Right.
Essentially, in my opinion, it gives this whole project a more industrial feel.
Right.
And that's the whole purpose of your review is to prevent that.
I agree.
And I think totally changes.
To that end, I'm going to ask Mrs. Graves if she'd like to make
Can I
a
actually
comment.
point out the planning board's authority in the rules and regulations? It states directly all utilities shall be underground.
Right.
So the board does have the authority to impose that standard.
So Ms. Graves, would you like to come forward? Sure.
I haven't tried in a long time, in many months, but I think that we all lose sight of what is going on here, and I know it's not. It's hard for people, whether it's the electric department, whether it's the solar people or whatever, but people that do not have to come out of their homes every day and look at this. We have put up with a lot. We've been dealing with this for a year. We have been very patient. We have worked really hard to be good neighbors. We are the ones that every day have to deal with the noise, the mud in the roads, the large rocks that are constantly in the road, being harassed with no trespassing notices, and what have you. We are the ones that are trying to be patient individuals, and then you walk out of your home and you see a whole thing of poles. We were given an idea of what this was going to look like, and we were told at the very beginning by this committee that the facade of Wethersfield Street would not be affected very greatly at all. It would be very minimal. And anyone that drives down Wethersfield Street today will see that that's not happened. That has not happened. The street is a mess. These poles just add to it. And it's kind of like a slap in the face for all of us that have been so patient and have been so worried for months about our properties. And I'll say it again, if your property is not across the street, if you don't look at this every day, I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're the planning board, I
And the poles, like I said, were just a slap in the face. So we just want a little respect, I guess.
The polls are contradict the plan we approved, so we're dealing with that, okay?
Thank you, we appreciate it.
That's what I was going to add to this, is that you made a decision that they were not to give up ground. What is there to discuss?
Not much.
No, we're having that, you're right, I understand.
Well, yeah, you could
They are
amend,
not responsible for this.
you could amend the site plan, as you well know. But
Right.
In the cases where it's a significant modification, you have to hold a whole
Public hearing.
Absolutely, and that's, we considered that as well, and at this point, you know, I don't know how you're going to proceed, because I don't see how, you know, I don't think it makes sense to allow you to continue to string wires on those poles until we have some determination as to whether they belong there in the first place.
And if they do, they're putting them up at their risk.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see, I mean, the representative from the light department, I mean, can they go underground?
Anything can go underground, it's gonna cost more, it's gonna be.
Yeah. I gotta, you know.
The cost is,
No, but that was my big concern. My concern, there was a safety reason they couldn't be, in which case we'd have a different set of facts to consider.
So, the put them underground would be, it requires a different type of installation than what we normally do, which is over there. The type of installation that we're going to do now has equipment that we have in stock that is easily replaceable. That, so if something did happen, a tree fell, whatever, we have the equipment to replace it in stock. If you went underground, the tree fell on a piece of underground switchgear, you're talking about weeks, maybe months to order a new piece of equipment to replace that, to get the solar field back up and running.
That's.
I mean, it's underground all over the state.
I was going to say, I guess I run the risk that I'll be out of power for 6 weeks because I don't have underground in my neighborhood.
For instance, it was just an underground fire tonight as well.
It's a requirement of our regulation for something.
So.
It's not like people live in it. It is.
Sure. I mean, I hope that the site wasn't developed differently because these poles are going in. I mean, you're saying they had to expand the roadway for the machine that.
Are they cleaning up the street?
That's got nothing to do with the light product.
Nothing.
We can do anything.
No, and I feel like you're very much in the middle of this, look, this isn't an enforcement board, but I can tell you that it seems like everyone is pointing out to us that, from the community, is telling us that, look, you got something on the plan that the applicant has violated. What are you going to do about it? And what we're going to do about it, it seems to me like we need to tell the building inspector to halt the project until we get this issue resolved.
Well, you don't have to halt the project if you say you're going underground.
There you go.
That's what the plan says, that's what we asked for, that's what the neighbors...
And I guess otherwise, we're going to need you to submit an application for a modification.
And that will
That
get...
means you're going to revisit something you've already decided.
Hey, no. It means that procedurally they have the right to do that, and procedurally we have the right to deny it if we come to the conclusion that, it seems like it was... The impact on the neighborhood was the sole issue in this case. And this creates it's not even like these telephone poles are 50 feet apart. They're not even spaced like they would on our out front. this is a cluster of telephone poles going up over this little knoll.
This is a major change, so therefore there's a public hearing necessary if they want to ask for a change.
And there's no guarantee of that it would be
No.
approved.
No, absolutely right.
I would think they
I think the
could
same issues
read
would be
the feeling of the
present.
board.
Please.
Just one question though. So, as I described earlier, the point of interconnection is the point where the Raleigh light distribution system differs from the actual development, the actual solar array.
Right.
So that part, or the overhead part, is on the light part.
I think there's one pole we anticipated would be above ground. And then everything else would go.
So I guess what I'm getting at is this part of the project is on the light part. So what you're saying to me is now we have to take the burden of doing the underground from Weathersfield Street to the point of interconnection and change the what we've already done.
No, because what happens is that's private property. They have to supply the duct line in.
Understood, but...
You don't pay for it, they do.
No, I understand that part of it, but it's part of something that we have to now change what we've already done. And...
You know, I honestly, I wish I could tell you exactly what, because the way I feel about this, you got an applicant who hired a contractor. Whether that contractor is Raleigh Light or, a private electrical contractor, the applicant is still responsible to make sure his contractor complies with the approval that the applicant has. So I suppose whatever questions you have, you got to ask them how they want you to resolve it with them.
Well, it's more like I would tell them how I want to, because that part of that system belongs to basically the town of Raleigh.
I see.
As a distribution system, because I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. That point from Weathersfield Street to the last pole belongs to the Raleigh Light Department or the town of Raleigh.
Where's the last pole?
Probably 150 feet in from Weathersfield Street.
Why can't it be at the street?
The reason we did a cluster of poles is to minimize the effect of going out into the development to string a 400-foot pole line to put them out 150 feet each line.
Plan doesn't call for any poles.
Right.
I understand that. I'm trying to give an explanation why the poles are 6
So we'd move one pole and then, I'm just trying to get your scope. So that 150 feet is what we're talking about?
Well,
It's Raleigh's responsibility?
The contractor is responsible for the point of interconnection out. That's their part of the project. The light department is from the point of interconnection back to Weathersfield Street. So the further you go out, the further that overhead line will go. But I understand what the problem is with the seeing the poles. I understand that. So you're telling me that we're going to have to order all the equipment to go underground from Weathersfield Street, and there is a lot of equipment. There's air brakes, there's reclosers, there's metering, which has already been ordered for the project.
Why can't you change the point of connection?
The point of common coupling is basically it's addressed in every PPA, and that's the point where basically ownership of the project, you have to have that interconnection point to address who owns what.
Yes, but you've got the point of connection well into the property.
Right, because we have to own metering, we have to own air brakes or points of disconnection, and that we can't do that on the distribution system on Weathersfield Street, so we have to go into the project to make that equipment available.
So, does that have to happen overhead, or can that happen subsurface?
Anything can be done with subsurface.
Okay.
It's just a matter of...
That answers the question.
I think there's a logistical problem that the applicant has to work out with you as their vendor, I suppose, or partner in this. But I can't necessarily give you the answer. I guess you have to get your engineers to come up with an answer. Yes.
Last question. If you do it subsurface, aren't you going to have manholes, risers, access to the point of connection?
No manholes, anything like that. It would be basically underground conduit would rise up in a recloser, an underground recloser, not underground, but it would be a pad mount, recloser would be a pad mount, switchgear would be a pad mount. So you can see multiple pieces of equipment going up the driveway.
That's what I'm asking.
There'd be big green boxes.
That's what I'm asking. And so I think this board should know that that's coming.
Yeah, but a green box versus a 30-foot telephone pole.
Understood. But maybe a line of green boxes, and I'm just throwing this out here, for the abutters and the board, a line of green boxes might be more offensive than perhaps one pole. Not 5 or 6 poles, but one pole in the property to do your transition.
Oh, I see
I
what
don't
you're
know
saying
what else
is
has to be done.
the first 150 overhead and then go subsurface?
Or 50 or whatever.
Okay.
Is that not still?
Is that an option that minimizes the visual impact? I think that's what we're all striving for, to minimize the visual impact.
It doesn't matter if there's a pole 150 feet in, 50 feet in, 20 feet in. I still put the underground from that point to these green boxes.
But
You're
at
still gonna have
150 in, it doesn't affect.
I think what Larry was hoping is you can put those brakes on the first pole, correct?
And landscape.
Yeah, but I think what he's saying is we're still going to have
The step ups each.
There's probably 4 pieces of equipment that I need to have.
Okay.
So I can't locate it on one pole. It has to be in a series of events.
4 pieces of equipment never were shown on our plan.
No, would they have been? They were shown on the construction plan, which is the same for most developments.
Bear in mind that this was all subject to Robert White's decision and the construction.
Like that, it's the same equipment that's on the Central Street Solar Project. It's going to not look the same, but it's going to be the same equipment in that line of poles that's at the Central Street.
There is a part of the access there just above that first catch basin that's right on the left as you go in, on the opposite side of your poles. Just a little bit above that is kind of a level space that I don't think is proposed for any other use. Would it be possible to put your above ground boxes in that area and landscape around them?
Right.
Without looking at the actual layout of the property and the elevations, I can't tell you that for sure.
That's an idea.
Because the underground electric was supposed to be on the opposite side of the road from the poles. So it would come down perhaps and go through the above ground appurtenances that you're describing you're going to need to have that none of us knew were going to be part of the project. And then go from there to one pole to the line to Weathersfield Street. I mean,
we'd have to basically talk and then come up with an engineering plan to submit to you to show you exactly what it's going to look like. I'm not going to sit here and tell you.
It doesn't seem like the approach of, okay, just go underground is going to be the end all here, because I think we're going to end up with some appurtenances that are going to be up there.
With that said, it sounds like we're getting into the modification.
Yeah.
I would say
What's the size of these boxes approximately?
One of them can be as large as 10 by 10.
Well,
10 feet by 10 feet by probably 4 or 5 feet high.
you have to fence them in, protect them?
No.
Okay. And they can be painted any color you want?
No, they remain green.
Why?
That's just the way they come. You can't paint over there. You can't do anything to them.
We've done it in Salem. We painted them.
So, maybe just a clarification for my part. So this is something that we're, depending on what the decision of the planning board is, I'm going to have to change as in our construction part of it. Is this something that can be done while the project's going on? Is this something that has to be?
Yeah.
I mean,
You're going to have to see the paper.
I do think we'd like to see the project continue for you, but I think we need the assurance that the result is going to be bringing this in compliance with the plan, and if not, that if it's going to be something that's going to be drastically different than the plan or constitute more than a minor modification that we can do on a field correction, we'd need the applicant to come back and tell us where these
10 by 10.
10 by 10 structures are going to go.
That's not a minor
Anything the
modification.
applicant does at this point,
This is a major.
Right, right. You know, and if they continue, potentially the board could ask them to enforce the order against them. Yes, ma'am.
You know, I see in front of me a group of men who are very respected. You guys do really hard work for our town. It takes hours of your own. This has been going on for a long time. What I honestly and truly do not understand is you did, after a large amount of discussion, hours of looking into this, came to a conclusion. Now, if you have to revisit this because of boxes that you feel people will think are too big or too lean, or maybe one or two poles, it concerns me, no matter, even if you have to revisit it, it really concerns me that somebody somehow didn't know what your decision was, decided to take the chance to put up telephone poles. I'm sorry, but this to me just seems like is someone pushing a button to see what they can get away with. I'm not trying to be nasty about this. It doesn't make any sense to me. You talk about settling this, but this group of men came to a decision, and somehow that decision got stepped on, and I don't understand it. I don't think it's okay. Even if you have to revisit this.
Well, I appreciate the kind words for what this board does here. We are all volunteers, so thanks for recognizing that we put in some time. To your point, though, I don't describe any negative motives to any of the people that are on this project. I think it's not worth it to try to point fingers. I think we've got to figure out where we go from here, though. I do think we need to enforce the order that we've provided, and that and it does sound like they may not be able to deliver this project in compliance with that order. So we may need to consider a modification, but we're not going to. I think it would be a hard sell to say we're going to take 6 poles going over the hill like they are presently. So I'd be surprised if that's the outcome of a modification hearing.
How come the electrical company wasn't aware of this when this was all going on?
I can only say that that's the interplay between the applicant and the electrical company, But I can see that down the road we may say, okay, well, listen, you have subsurface, you do need these above the surface facilities. We may have to modify our plan to allow those necessary elements.
But there'll be landscaping.
But we will also consider landscaping.
And I think the project would be put on hold until at least you get enough information to be able to go.
I don't know how they proceed from here. I don't think there's a lot of, but.
Is it possible to ask for how long it would take to get the poles down?
Yeah, I don't know.
To remove the poles from...
Mr. Beatrice, do you propose, and I suppose the project manager, how would you like to see us proceed from here, understanding that this is a condition that probably doesn't stand?
Yes. So I think, we'll probably have to have a discussion with Raleigh Municipal Light and figure out what is the plan of action that we need to put in place in order to figure out how to go underground. Pulling the poles down, if that brings us within compliance to move the project forward, and we figure this out after, then we'll pull the poles down, and then.
Aware that it was supposed to be underground?
That's up to Raleigh Light, and that's under the jurisdiction.
Were you aware as the contractors?
That's irrelevant to what is required by state safety and National Electric Code. That's under the jurisdiction of the Light Department and the Department of Public Utilities with the state. Their poles are owned by the Light Department, not by us.
That's not totally true.
You're building something.
We did not erect those poles. They do not belong to us, nor are the wires going across those poles. Those are property and scope of work of Raleigh Municipal Light Department.
So, just for a point of clarity, if it's okay, direct your questions to the board, and then we'll get their input. Thank you.
I just want to say that normally when you interact or interconnect these solar systems, it doesn't matter what utility it is. This just happens to be Raleigh Municipal Light at this moment. They tell you what to do. So when we apply for interconnection, They tell us how we can interconnect to that system, and they tell us what we need to do to comply to interconnect that solar system to it. They, in their purview, think about public safety, how do they normally work, this is the way we interconnect things. So basically, it is a process that happens usually after permitting, to be honest, and then the utility will tell you exactly how they're going to set things up. They come out and they look at the site, they do a site walk, and they figure out where they want to put their poles, how they want to mount their equipment, and you have to comply with that. So we weren't necessarily thinking that going above ground was an issue here, to be honest, because that is utility property. We're just interconnecting to the utility property. And there's an easement on that property that Raleigh Light has on that property. If we do go further up the road, that's another issue, is now the easement has to go for Raleigh Municipal Light, has to go further up the road, and that becomes their responsibility to maintain that and all the way up the street.
Are you saying that you never looked at the plan?
No, I did look at the plan. What I was saying is that...
Yeah, again, Mr. Burns, just correct it this way.
It's not helpful.
Mr. Town.
That was there on the plan that you guys, you said you didn't see it, but on the plan that you guys did see, was there any green boxes on there? Was there any kind of underground plan of action?
Well, firstly, we did see the plan that we approved. The plan that was referenced, that was a construction plan that was never presented to the board and never reviewed and certainly never approved. So your question is, did we see the plans?
No, was there a plan that included these green boxes and an underground structure?
No, the plan that was approved they didn't call out where they'd be putting the infrastructure.
So it was kind of...
No, I mean, those items could be considered minor modifications and field corrections. But now, understanding the scope of it, 10 by 10 structures are more like buildings, and they likely are more than a minor modification, so we may have to hold a public hearing to figure out where those go.
And considering the neighbors, that's the right way to do it.
And the big thing was is that people did want things to look good, and that was one of the most discussed, one of the most important things. This is a major thing that somehow got lost in the shuffle.
Oh, I don't think it got lost in the shuffle. I think I don't want to say it got lost by the shuffle here. I think it got lost in the shuffle. Yeah. Okay. So, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about how can we help you proceed, but also, make sure we get this.
If they take the poles down, then it's not an issue and they can proceed.
I think at this point, the answer is that the poles come down. We're in compliance. We have our point of common coupling that we are responsible for to be underground up to, which we are. Yep. And then it's up to working with Raleigh Light to figure out how that should be taken care of. And
that makes sense, and I think if the poles come down, that's going to put this issue to bed. That being said, once you finally figure out where everything's going to happen, you got to discuss with the rest of your team whether it's going to constitute what we would consider a modification of the existing plan.
If we modify the existing plan.
Right, but I mean, I think the minute you start putting that infrastructure on there,
Raleigh,
you're modifying the plan.
I understand that, but the interconnection equipment that Raleigh Municipal Light Department owns is not our jurisdiction. We can't tell Raleigh Municipal Light Department how to install their equipment or where or when.
No, I know, but you can figure out where it's going to go and let us know in advance.
But they're going to put an easement in for anything that's Raleigh's.
Right, and then you also have to grant an easement to Raleigh, which would have to be that modification.
They don't want
That's
an easement of 300 feet.
Sure, please. Yeah.
We're talking to Dennis, my commissioner, and we talked for a minute about maybe a solution to this plan. And that would be any equipment that we need that's already on water would be located on Weathersfield Street. And then we would simply go underground from one pole on Weathersfield into the project.
Seems pretty similar.
I mean, that's what we're looking for.
We want to work this out. I mean, at the end of the day, we're the mediator between this on what the town folks need and Rowley's equipment as well. We will abide by the existing plans and conditions that's set forward.
See how it
That's
goes.
great. I mean, if you can stay within the four corners of the plan, then that's what we want to see you do. That's what we wanted to see you do when we approved it. If there's going to be new infrastructure that's going to become a major modification, then we do need it to come back before the board. Yes.
Can I take like a 5-minute recess and talk outside with the developer?
Yeah, we're wrapping it up here just the same, but go ahead, take a minute. Yeah.
I have another question anyway. Go on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not for them.
Okay.
No, going back to the panels. Oh, they're leaving. Oh, I can say it to the board.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was on site the other day, they were erecting some hardware to put the racks in prior to putting the panels in.
Mm-hmm.
They had a representative on site giving them instruction on this fabrication that they're doing. And I told them if they needed to, I thought it would be fine to put up 1 or 2 panels just so they had the instruction there to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to communicate that to the board. If the board's sensitive to it,
Sure.
then we should tell them not to do that, but I didn't see a harm in, going through
That's the whole as well. And Mr.
process.
Caraccios, you may have seen a couple of panels going up, but you realize that's very limited. Yeah, good.
Thank you for your time. I don't want to be on the phone too long.
All right. So, well, we got a minute here. Can we look at that American Town? Well,
Yeah.
actually, I'm going to recuse myself from that.
Okay, I'll take over as chair. Next,
In your packet,
we've got the American Tower at 594 Main Street.
yeah, this is one of those at the project. It's actually located. Well, you actually.
It's actually on an existing location.
Existing tower location, existing compound.
Is it affecting it in any different way?
The property's owned by Donald Savory. So this is where I believe
I've seen it.
The junkyard is up there so the fence. There's a fenced-in area.
And it's an existing system.
It's an existing system. They're proposing. It's American Tower proposing a diesel generator to go on the ground level. So they'll actually currently a lot of that compound area is where there's actually fixtures.
Is there a picture of it in here?
I'm sorry.
Do we have a picture of it in here?
Yeah, it should be it. Yeah, but there should be concrete pads, but otherwise it's gravel. So where this generator is going to go down, they're going to put a concrete pad and the diesel generator on top of it. So this is kind of different from the others. Usually it's antenna arrays that are going up. If this were like a propane generator, the fire chief would actually want to get involved. In this case, I ran it by the fire chief. The diesel generator would not. It's not. He's not really concerned.
Is it visible
about.
from the street?
From the street, this is at the back. Actually, if you look at the compound, it's on the back side of the compound. Now, it won't be any more visible from the street than any of the existing equipment.
That's
and
what I want to
it's
hear.
further away from.
So what do you need from us?
Need a motion?
So this is really another one of the exemption, that we would be looking at. Essentially, this. I saw no reason to call that this would require a site plan review because the fire chief doesn't want to, he has no conditions.
Ready to give you a motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're going to give me a motion.
To accept the generator? Is that
Yeah, as a minor.
as a minor modification?
No, not as exempt.
Is it exempt?
Exempt from site plan review.
Okay.
As exempt from site plan review?
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Second on down there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Done. Yep. You can come back.
All right.
We can go home in 5 minutes.
You were notified out of the room.
I wasn't paying attention.
I know you were.
So we're back on the record on the issue of the Raleigh Solar. So it sounds like you were able to work out some logistics so that you can get this done without any modifications in what we've approved.
That's right. There'll be so we'll remove the poles from the site. They'll be taken down, and then the equipment will be mounted on existing infrastructure on Weathersfield Road.
Okay. I mean, that's, you don't need our approval for that. That's exactly consistent with what we've got out there.
If you do need anything, gotta come back, that's all.
Thank you, and I, certainly don't like seeing anybody redo work.
No, I'm glad we could, come to this agreement and
Yeah.
work this out.
Can I ask when the poles will come down?
Immediately.
Pardon?
Well, I mean that's up to Dan to answer. We can't take them down. I'm pretty strong, but
Probably, tomorrow's Thursday, probably Wednesday.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right, well, appreciate everyone's time on this. That's it for the agenda items tonight. We've got a couple other things we're probably going to talk about, but...
Talk about going to bed.
Yeah.
Let's go for minutes, that's it. We're gonna sign something.
I'm going to tear into these minutes. My grammar mistakes.
oh yeah, they did. Yeah, we were just kind of
I listened to you here.
I'm gonna be an alternate on the
I gotta tell you, there were times I think about it. But anyway, I think Terry.
I think we need some of that passion. And, but thank you. For the first 4 years of this, I never dealt with these.
Well, it's a good question.
Yeah, I'm hoping. This was a strange decision.
I know you're a role person.
But I didn't put my kids to bed tonight. So. Hey, we need to close this meeting now. So just for one, thank you, and please keep coming.
Thank you.
So I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. We get the meeting next week.
Okay.
Yeah. All in favor? Aye. All right.
Unless he's got so much special.